Welcome back to another Common Sense Guys discussion. Today we're going to be talking with Todd the Smaller, and I managed to scare myself because I have myself on YouTube, so that went really well. And got my headphones in. So, still the same person that's not really great at doing computers. So don't think that anything's changed there. But we are going to be talking to Todd the Smaller about immigration, borders, and we may, depending on time, get into other aspects because we were talking about different aspects of politics as well. So we'll see how that goes, should we say. But I suppose Todd would be a good name to address you, or do you want me to address you any other way, sir?
Todd's fine. Yeah.
No worries. Would you like to introduce yourself to, well, I say the chat, but probably mostly my chat and what you do and everything else like that?
Yeah. So I'm Todd. I'm an anarcho-communist. I'm 20 years old and I live in Ontario, Canada.
No?
That's about all that's interesting about me.
Yeah, you say interesting. Sorry,
Noteworthy.
I couldn't help. Yeah, I couldn't help myself. Sorry on that one. So I suppose the best way of framing this to kick this off for everybody is I responded to something that somebody said on Twitter, and I think you did as well, which is what happened beforehand. So, yeah, we would say talking about the US border and then what the problems kind of were, but we're not going to get into that bit. We're just going to talk about how you said that you wanted to get rid of borders yourself. I know you said that satirically because you said that off of camera and whatnot, but is there any sort of backing to that, should I say?
Yeah, so I do eventually want no borders. I don't want to just up and get rid of them all. But I do want the end goal to have no borders.
Okay. Well, I suppose the best way of continuing the conversation without going, I don't think this never works, would be, how would you think that you'd be able to implement that without going too far into politics, because we'll do that later on?
Yeah. So I think the best way is to look at what Europe is currently doing with their borders. Europe is open borders, however, they still have nations, and I think that's something a lot of people can't wrap their head around when we talk about a borderless society as nations and no real borders. Because if you really think,
correct you,
yeah,
just before we go any further, the EU isn't open borders. The EU is actually a part of what they call a Shenyang program, which is only people that are part of the European Union and the trading bloc are allowed to have free movement of peoples. Anybody outside of that trading agreement doesn't actually have a right of freedom of movement inside of Europe. Just so you know.
Yes. Yeah. So that's very similar to what Canada and the US has as well. So I can cross over the American border as long as I go through certain points. Yeah. I do have I think the main difference between European borders and the Canadian-American border would be that I have to go through an entrance point, and you guys can just cross over wherever.
No, we still have entrance points.
Oh, do you do? Okay.
Yeah, because I know some have entrance points.
Yeah, so I think that would be the first step. Start with something like that, and move on from there. So you can't just look at open border. You can't just look at borders and ignore everything else. That's a fair argument against when people say, "Let's just get rid of borders," because it does have.
Question though. Even though let's just say that they have a complete and utter trading agreement and they do have open borders. They technically don't, but let's say that they do have open borders. They have trading agreements and they also have laws in themselves. So they still have forms of borders, even though we're talking about immigration, particularly at this moment in time, or specifically, should we say. How would you go about the point of, if there's no borders from a point of immigration, are there still nation borders?
Sorry, can you repeat that last part?
If there's no, should we say, immigration borders, would there still be in your mind the idea of a national border, as in a border of how laws are prescribed to people?
Yes, I can't predict exactly how that'd look. However, Canada and Mexico actually technically do have open borders. It's kind of complicated because we have a whole country in between us. But as a Canadian, I can go over to Mexico anytime I want with no visa. All I have to do is get the plane ticket or drive over there. And I don't need a visa. I don't need anything like that. And that would be considered a form of open borders. Open borders isn't just no borders. It's free travel between borders. Whether that be like in Northern/Republic of Ireland, where they have those entrance points, but they can travel fairly freely between the two, which I know there's a lot of history behind why that is. Or whether it looks something more like Europe, where there's the trade agreements so that people who are part of the European Union in those countries have free travel between those. And so that's probably how it would start off looking, and then you just over time make the restrictions looser and looser until you have a point where as this is happening, the countries' governments are getting closer, because look at Europe. The countries have its own governing body above their own governments as well.
Yeah, but is that a good thing?
I would say so.
So just to clarify, and we'll let you continue as I said before, but I just wanted to clarify. So you think that it's a good idea to have a government above another government, remembering what you told me beforehand?
I think it's good for the route I want to take. So having a government above another government means that as the borders loosen, you still have another governing body that can take the place of the old one. So instead of there being no more English government, let's say the French and English just completely got rid of their borders. Free travel between the two, doesn't matter about passports or anything. You don't need to go through checkpoints. You could swim across that giant river thing. Yeah, the Seine, if you wanted to, and it wouldn't matter. It would be, before that could even happen, you'd have to have something that could take its place. And to avoid having the French be like, it's going to be our government, and the English saying it's going to be their government, they'd have to make a combined government similar to the EU beforehand. And then they just dissolve their two governments into that government. So the politicians would never leave. It's just now a bigger country.
Okay, that I understand what your premise is, but I'm going to actually pick on something that Seamus Carmichael actually said in the chat, which I was thinking as he actually said this, which was the problem with a government above a government is that democracy fades to the back. So, for instance, I don't know if you know anything about the European presidency election that we had recently. Nobody in the whole of Europe voted for those presidential candidates. Do you know what the House of Lords is? Is the equivalent in UK law?
I think that would be the equivalent of Canadian Supreme Court, right?
Similar, but it doesn't actually deal with judiciary. It's more of a case of checks and balances to what Parliament do. So Parliament will try to ratify a law, and then after it's just before it goes through Parliament, it has to go through the House of Lords to be ratified the last time. So it can be stopped through that point. But the reason why I use the House of Lords is because it would be like the House of Lords picking a parliamentary leader and then saying that that leader is now president. That's how the European elections for their presidency work. So where is the actual democracy in that for what you would have suggested beforehand?
So what I would suggest, I would say that those should be elected positions. I don't think the politicians should get to, I don't think they should be appointed positions. I think the people of the countries should get to elect their representatives to the above court, as well as I think the people should get to vote on pretty much everything in those governments, like on those levels. Sorry, one second.
But that's the problem with having a government above a government, is that if you're going to vote from a local level, let's say that, let's take it down to even a simpler analogy rather than doing national to international, which is technically what it is. Let's take it from a provenance, as in a state.
Yeah.
If you have state legislation and you can vote for that state legislation that then goes to the national level legislation to be ratified, for instance, you can't do state legislation to national legislation to international legislation, can you? Without somebody somewhere blocking it because they disagree with it. Remembering that you now have even more countries involved, which could, not saying they do, but could block it on the grounds of that's going to stop us from being able to get, let's say, oranges into the country easier.
Yeah. So I would say I would want it to work more like, so you have your municipal government, and then you have your provincial or state government, and then you have your national government, and you get to vote for people all along that route, depending on what system you have, and depending on how your voting works, it's more or less fully democratic. Pretty much anyone gets to vote as long as you don't have gerrymandering and things like that.
I understand where you're going, but I don't think
Yeah.
that I'm not trying to belittle you when I say this.
Yeah.
I'm just saying I don't think that you realise that when you go from state or provenance legislation to national legislation, that the whole nation could then vote down what they think is going to be bad for the rest of their states or provinces. You then go into the aspect of when it goes to internationally. Say, for instance, Portugal wants to open up using Europe. Portugal wants to open up an extra tourist attraction, but Spain decide that they don't want them to do that because it's going to interfere with them, or the Algarve do. Let's say that. They can then veto that and stop it, which means that because it's going to EU law and legislation, that they can stop it. So how does anything get done if the countries or the ideas of land masses, because you want to get rid of the borders anyway, the land masses themselves would actually want to stop other countries or other land masses from actually getting anything?
So I think I understand what you're coming from, and so what I would say is it wouldn't be country to country, wouldn't be working like a province to city or nation to province where it can veto what the province does. If Alberta, let's take Alberta and Ontario, if Ontario wants to do something within its province, like the provincial government wants to do something, the Albertan government has no say in that matter. The national government, however, does. So it would work on a similar level to that. So
but Alberta, the legislators from Alberta can say that we don't want that to happen on the national debate, can't they?
They can say that, but they can't really do anything about that without trying to propose a bill, and then that bill would have to, or a vote, yes, and then that vote, it would have to be voted on, and they would have to have a majority, and so they would have to be able to convince enough other countries that that's bad as well. But it's complicated, so different countries have different trading agreements with each other. And so some countries are more friendly to each other, just like how in Canada or Britain, there are some political parties more friendly to each other. The NDP, our NDP and our Green Party are far more friendly to each other than the NDP and the Conservatives, or the Liberals and the Conservatives.
Sure. But what you're actually suggesting is the idea of people banding together to pass, should we say, legislation that they agree with. So if say most of the provinces decided that they wanted, let's use something that's obviously going to be controversial. Say that they wanted all trans people to be classified as humans. I know they already are, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
That they all have human rights and everything else like that. But there's only one province, and that province has the most voters and the most amounts of people in it. If they all vote, and it's all down to a vote, then that province would generally win, which means that the democracy actually wouldn't work. So how do you actually put checks and balances into that? And how do you then transfer that to a wider scale?
So this was a similar problem that Canada faced when we were first forming, because we had a bunch of provinces just sort of popping up out of nowhere and very little checks and balances. And that's why we have our Supreme Court, which does kind of double duty as both a judiciary court, and they can do what the American court does, and they can block laws or stop or change laws, and it's their job to interpret our Charter of Rights and Freedoms as well as the British Constitution, because we are a constitutional monarchy.
Sure.
Yeah. So what you would have to have is you'd have to have similar things, but on an international level. You just have to have it. Uh, I would say you should have them voted on and have at least one judge per country.
Sure. Let's say that I'm now Eastern European, or use the
Yep.
European bloc. Let's say that I've got Romania, Bulgaria, Czech Republic,
Mm.
and a couple of other Eastern Bloc countries that all want to make sure that they don't have immigration, for instance. So let's just use that. And they all vote on it.
Mm-hmm.
And them as all of a country has decided, as they've done it locally, as in a nationalisation, have all voted that they don't want immigration. Why is it that the bigger government, as you said, the international government, can then force that nation or province or state to then not govern themselves? I don't understand where should we say, the rights, because you're trying to use the idea of a national statement, as in the checks and balances that happen in a nation, and trying to put it as across to the international stage. Now, I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think in principle there's probably a way it can work. But in the way that you're trying to, should we transmute it, it's not going to work, because the nation already has its own checks and balances, but nothing checks and balances what you want as the international government.
So you're saying because if I understand you correctly, we'd have to implement the checks and balances before we implement the international government. Is that what you're saying?
No, what I'm saying is that due to the fact that we already have national governments, we have our own national checks and balances. But if you try and change that to having the international as the final say on everything, then you don't have the checks and balances, because every nation can then go against one nation, and that nation can then lose all of its prosperity.
Well, no, because just like our nation has our national checks and balances, but I don't know what it's like in England, but in Canada we have checks and balances at the provincial scale as well. We also have checks and balances built into our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, so that provinces they can't just be overruled by the national government. They have set parameters in which they work with. There are certain things the province takes care of, there are certain things the nation takes care of, and there are certain things the municipality takes care of.
I completely utterly understand where you're going, but the point that I'm making is that, yes, that works on a national level. How do you then transfer that to an international level with other nations that also have those own versions of their own checks and balances? How could that ever work?
Well, this is where you have to have that you'd have to deal with all this before you got rid of borders, obviously. But
I'm not even touching the border issue at the minute. I'm still talking about how do you integrate the nations of themselves, because before the borders were to dissolve, let's use that word, you would actually have to have the point of nations being integrated so they would actually be able to work together. So you would have to have a form of trading agreement and national agreements anyway. So you'd have to have those balances. But how do you get the actual checks and balances on an international stage where all countries can actually go against it without having a veto system like they do in Europe? And by the way, that's not me advocating that Europe is democratic. I'm just saying that that is the only way of being able to protect your own nation.
So you would probably have to start creating agreements between countries to change their entire political scape, which is hard, I know. So you'd have to look at it on a sociological level, and you'd have to so you'd instead of having to try to do that through the state, like I said this before we were live, this would take a very long time. So you'd have to start changing the society around it on a national level, or even on just your local level. You'd have to start gaining momentum that way, and I don't expect this to take like 10 years to implement. I expect it to take hundreds of years to implement.
But
where
what if the people don't actually want to go along with it, and it starts going to the point of how the Overton window generally goes, which is goes
well,
fairly to the right or fairly to the left, and never sticks anywhere for a long period of time?
well, those who you mean the people in the country?
Yeah, the Overton window of the world always changes. Sometimes
Yeah.
they lean more to
Yeah.
the right, and then they lean more to the left. It always
Yeah.
changes. So how would you be able to implement that slowly, knowing that the Overton window generally changes within 5 to 8 years, regardless, anyway?
Well, because if you're looking at it on a scale of 5 to 8 years, yes, it changes quite frequently, and it's a huge change. But when you look at it from a larger aspect of, let's say, 100 years, if we look at us now versus 100 years ago, we're generally more progressive by quite a bit than 100 years ago.
We're also more capitalistic as well.
In some aspects, yes.
Most aspects, even including the Scandinavian countries, which do not call themselves socialists. And I'm not trying to pick on the idea of socialism. No. I'm just saying that they actually implement the idea of capitalism because it works better. So we're actually more capitalist than we are anything else, as well as being more progressive, because we know humans are humans and we should protect them.
Yes, so we are currently more capitalistic. And now if we look at it on like a 20-year scale, yes, we switch between the two quite often. We have gone in Canada from pretty much full-on communism in like 20 years ago to now, which is somewhere in between. Our Overton window is pretty in the center right now.
Yeah, it's in a shift at the minute.
Yeah. So to combat that, you'd have to work really hard if you're on the left, like me. But the other idea is you have to you'd have to get people used to this idea of not everything's for profit, which is why capitalism has succeeded so well. Because even in the USSR, things were still running for profit. Even in China, things are still running for profit. You have to start working against that, and that's the only way you'd be able to get the Overton window to consistently move left, is to work against the profit motive of people.
You mean work against the idea of trading? You trade for something to get something?
No, because profit isn't trade. Profit is no, because trade is just trying to give something for what you believe is an equal value.
Yeah. So if I gave you, what is that? What is that?
That's trade. Profit would be, I give you a carrot and you give me a pig, and now I have profit.
Sure, but that's still trade.
Yes, that's trade, but trade and profit are two different things. That they're not.
No, trade
inherent.
is part of profit. That they
what?
are. Trade is part of profit, as in it's intrinsically linked. You can't have profit without a trade.
Yeah, you can't have profit without trade, but you can have trade without profit.
Sure, but what would be the incentive to actually trade?
So you'd have to start working on having people work for the collective rather than their individual needs, or change what the
So you want to change human societies and how that they actually have evolved to operate?
I want to change our current human societies, yes. So in the past, we have had societies which show more collective. Try giving. Sorry, got distracted by the chat there.
Wouldn't worry about chat too much. They like to troll.
Yeah. What was I saying again?
We were talking about the idea of trade. No, sorry. We were talking about the idea
trade and profit. Yeah.
But we went on to the idea of changing society how it currently is, because you.
Yes. Yeah. So, if let's go to Native American lifestyle before the Europeans came. They had subsistence farming. They had collective groups of people that work together, and whether or not you believe humans are inherently greedy, they had a society created so that the best thing for the individual was to help the collective. And that's kind of the way you'd have to reform society.
Do you know how they treated their warriors compared to their hunter-gatherers? How
It,
they
it
would get
completely depends.
disproportionately more food.
It depends on which tribe you look at because they're so very different from each other.
Correct, but generalizations and generally,
If
most
we're looking
people. Go on.
if if we're looking at it generally, according to Canadian and American historians, it's a general rule that people got approximately the same.
Approximately. Okay.
Approximately the same. Yeah.
Okay. So when they traded with other, let's say, tribes, did they try and actually make a profit? Like if they were selling off a wife, how many horses would they sell them for?
They didn't sell their wives.
Sell their women then, because I know that they did, because they did trade to be able to make sure that they could actually have peace. They did that quite regularly.
Okay, so similar to Europe, however, so similar to Europe, yes, it was political. However, dissimilar to Europe, there was generally not a lot of monetary incentive outside of the tribes would often combine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Same as African tribes. It's been going on for years that they've always done
yes.
trade that benefits and profits one section over the other.
No, because they would both benefit from each other. It would be one group might be a little bit worse for wear at the time, maybe not. However, the increased size would give them more people to provide more for the collective, and that's how they ran things.
Okay, that's interesting, and I am actually going to use what Jenny Tollworth has just actually said in chat because I was going to use it anyway. But if you have a smaller tribe, they would generally lose their culture within the tribe that they've just joined. It would actually be assimilated inside of the tribe.
Eventually,
so
over time, yes.
Yeah, so they're actually losing then, aren't they? Which means the bigger tribe is actually profiting from taking over a smaller tribe.
I wouldn't describe assimilation of culture as losing.
Well, if you've lost your culture, the clues. I don't mean to be horrible, but the clues in the name. You've lost your culture, so you've lost.
But they haven't lost their cultures. They have just taken on a new one, and just like how the smaller tribe often would be assimilated into the old one, the bigger tribe would often take parts of the smaller tribe's culture as well. So it would be a melding, and yes, the smaller tribe would often lose more in the melding just due to their size, but the cultures would generally meld over time rather than just assimilate where one culture is entirely lost and the other culture stays prominent.
Okay. But let's just say that all of what you said is correct. I'm willing to do that for this thought experiments. All of the tribes that ever were able to assimilate and coexist, were they fighting among each other quite a lot? And you were suggesting that as a form of going back to?
No, I'm not saying go back to it, but I think it's a blueprint we can use going forward on how we can change our current society to be the individual working for the collective rather than trying to make the collective work for the individual. It wasn't we go back to that. It's we can draw inspiration from them like we have drawn inspiration from so many other societies to get where we are now.
I understand in drawing the inspiration and understand the idea of doing that. But how do you go back, or how do you use that blueprint to take away the points of trade that we have now, the jobs that we have now, to be able to do that for not necessarily free, but an incentive that doesn't require any money?
What do you mean doesn't require any money?
Well, because you're trying to suggest that what we do is that we take away the idea of currency, and all we do is a fair trade, as in we trade this for that. If you don't do it, if you have money, you're never going to be able to trade it as a fair way because one person will want to buy it for more. So if you want to do it as a collective trade, as working as one for the other and collectively, then you'd have to take money away. So how would you implement that?
Generally, what people would suggest would be to encourage co-ops over your traditional capitalist ownership of a company. So
that's not what I'm saying.
Okay. What do you?
I'm not saying that. How do you get the idea of implementing the takeover from different companies and whatnot? I'm saying with money, how do you get rid of money and then implement the idea of a trade-based system? Like I want to buy I want to get a washing machine, so I give you a fridge. If you don't have a currency, how do you trade?
You would trade based on whatever value you want. However, that I'm not even advocating that. I don't know what did I say that made you think I was advocating that?
Because that most Native American societies that you propose that we take the blueprint from would trade in goods, not in currency.
Yes, but that's just how they traded. I'm not going to change how they they didn't trade that way.
Okay, that's fine. That's my misconception. So how would you suggest that they trade on an idea of a beneficial basis then?
So essentially you can do similar to what they did where they had just the thing to thing trade. It wasn't currency. It was, let's say, a carrot to an apple, whatever.
Sure.
You just replace the apple with currency.
Sure.
So instead of when you open up the board, actually, when you get rid of the borders, the cultures start melding together. And as far as trade is concerned, there's a couple different suggestions on how to do that. There's one where you just have a government give away the stuff instead. You
How
have
does the government earn money?
What?
How does the government earn or keep resources, and how does it know how to redistribute the resources?
Well, I mean, you could have people apply for everything. You could have it for smaller things like food. You can just have it given away. One person.
So farmers are going to work for free.
Well, everyone would work for free in that society.
Why would they? If I got a choice of not working and getting everything for free, or queuing up for things, why would I work?
Because if you don't work, nothing's going to get made.
That's not my problem.
The other one would be you don't get to get anything if you don't work.
So there's now forcing me to do stuff to get stuff that you want from the government.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we just stick with the capitalistic system then? At least it's a forced incentive rather than being forced by government.
Why is being forced incentive any better than being forced by the government?
Because the forced incentive means I get to spend what money I get from the forced incentive, regardless on what I want, rather than being told what I can spend it on.
Because in a capitalist society, you have, let's take disabled people. So in an anarcho-communist society, it works on the principle of from each according to his ability to each according to his need.
Yes.
So if you cannot work, that's different than choosing not to work. If you choose not to work, you're not giving in according to your ability.
So you would take away the welfare system then for people that can work?
Yeah.
Okay. I wouldn't. I'm quite happy with the welfare system the way that it is.
Well, I think so. The welfare system is, in my opinion, a way for capitalists to essentially, what's the word I'm looking for? Subdue, I guess, the working class. So instead of having people face the fact that they can't make money because of capitalists, they just have the government give them a small amount of money to barely survive on, and it makes people be like, "Oh, we're kind of taken care of." But that's a whole other thing. Anyways.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I suppose that going on back to the actual idea of immigration and borders and whatnot, because we kind of
sidestepped there. Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that I want to get into on that actual point. There's so much that I want to get into, but going back to the actual borders, if you didn't have borders, how would you be able to implement any of these systems?
Well, you start implementing these systems before the borders were taken away, so that by the time the borders weren't there, it wouldn't be a culture shock.
I don't want to do what you want me to do.
Then you're not going to be a part of it.
So that means I'm a country all by myself. What about if
Yeah.
other countries don't want to join you?
They can also be all by themselves.
So that means that they would still have borders, and they would have borders on your border. So that means that people
Yeah.
wouldn't be able to transfer from your country or your landmass to their countries. So if you have, say, let's for instance use Mexico, and you had USA that had their border, and below Mexico, is it Guatemala? I think it's Guatemala.
Yes, it is
Guatemala that
Guatemala.
also had a border. That means that people in Mexico couldn't actually travel anywhere. That means that they would be absolutely stuck where they are because both countries have had a border. So saying that you don't want a border doesn't actually do anything if other countries won't accept it.
So, again, the only way you can get rid of borders is by having a group of countries that agree to it, similar to the EU. There's a collective of countries that have a trade agreement, and in that trade agreement, they also ended up opening up their borders to each to each other, and the countries that are not a part of that do not get to move freely with those countries, as the EU doesn't. People from the EU don't get to travel freely in those countries, outside of those countries into countries that aren't part of that. Sorry.
Sure.
However, all of those a lot of those countries in the EU, because you were talking about how Mexico and Canada, they don't share a border, so they still have to respect America's border. There's plenty of islands owned by countries within the EU that when you are born in those countries, you are an EU citizen, and you can travel freely to the other countries.
Sure.
Through
But
planes or whatever.
Yeah, but you have to be a citizen first, though, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, which means that if they don't have an agreement with the other countries, then they can't do that.
Well, see, what I'm saying is, over time, it essentially just create bigger and bigger countries until eventually you have the whole world being essentially one big country.
So you're a globalist then?
Yes, I'm a globalist.
Okay.
Although
so
that term is generally used as an anti-Semitic thing, so I generally don't like using it.
Well, by definition, you are a globalist. You
Yes.
want the world to unite under one country and one rule.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I know I'm a globalist. I'm just saying
that's
I
fine.
generally don't use it because it's generally used in an anti-Semitic way.
Well, let's hope that we're using it in the correct way then.
Yeah.
I suppose in that aspect, I still want to go back to the point of how does one government ever control the whole of the world?
How does one government control whole of Canada?
Because it has smaller governments, but that also has provinces and borders that actually control those smaller areas, the same as you have cities that also control their smaller areas.
Yeah, so it'd be the same thing.
So you wouldn't actually get rid of the countries then?
It'd be essentially no countries because you'd have one big country that people can move freely between. You'd still have provinces and everything. Countries would probably become provinces.
Okay, but we still have the original problem that we had before then. That means that those countries or provinces, as we now decided that's what they are, would have their own versions of government. How do they then implement what they want to the world government if the rest of the world decides that that's not what they want?
So when they join, like I was saying with the England and France thing, when they lose those borders, before that they would have to both change to the same systems of government.
No, you're misunderstanding. Fine, they go to the same massive sections of government. Let's use the EU as instance. They have to go by the massive European Union, but they still have their own governments that tell them what they can and cannot do.
Yes, before they get rid of the border, they would have to change even though they'd have to change their governments to match the other governments, and then you can remove the borders.
So you would force people to live by the way in which you want them to live, not in the way that the country decides that they want to live.
Well, the decision would be by the people, and depending on however the countries agree to do that, it'd be an agreement between the two.
How? If we all say, for instance, the UK, as we have done, decided that we didn't want to be part of the European Union anymore, how would it be a case of then we would then agree? Because we wouldn't, would we? And we wouldn't be run by the other government. Not unless you're trying to say that the EU would have to force us, as they are, into a trading agreement to then be part of the agreement to be able to be part of their world, which is still forcing you to do something.
No, what I'm saying is every country that adds that does this would have to be in it out of consent and would want to. So if a country doesn't want to, they won't join it, and they would never become part of this world government. So let's say Spain and France made an agreement, they joined up. So now you have one government, a new country there. And then let's say Italy ended up wanting to join as well. They would go through the same process, and now you have Italy, Spain, and France, no longer Italy, Spain, and France, and it's becoming one government.
So how would Spain and France implement their world governments to Italy, considering that Italy would be around about, I don't know, I think it's around 4,000 miles away from France?
That would be up to them, really. However, it'd
Well, it's
probably
your
work.
idea.
Sorry, what?
It's your idea. You're saying that that's the way
Yeah.
that you would want it to work, and saying that that would have those two countries there that would work together. So how would it work with Italy being on the other side of the world, so to speak? How would they talk to each other? How would they sort things out? How would they implement the same laws? How would the culture then be different in how they interpret their laws and how they do different things?
They'd probably have an agreed meeting place as far as how the agreement goes. And
Like what? Do you think that the European Union sticks out one laws that everybody follows, or do you think each country still has its own laws to follow?
no, I understand that in the EU, every country still has its own laws and everything.
Sure. So how would you implement the idea of France and Spain, for instance, being the same but different on the countryside? So them two trying to work together, and then having Italy on the other side of the world or the other side of Europe being completely disconnected. How would that work?
Well, they'd have to come to some sort of agreement between the two. Because again, Spain and France are now one. So similar to how Spain and France had to come to an agreement on how they're going to restructure their governments and how their laws are going to work, because there's like hundreds of laws. I can't tell you which laws are going to change and which laws won't.
No, I understand that. I'm
Yeah.
asking for a generalization. There's no point going into specifics, but
Yeah.
let's say you have age consent laws, for instance, which are, believe it or not, very, very different in all of those three different countries.
Yes.
And how would that be implemented under one world government?
That would have personally, how I would do it would be through referendums. You would have
So would that be under one world government then? Or would that have to be down to provinces and how you understand
We're
the
not
idea
even-
of the nations?
right now we're not at one world government. Right now we're at like two countries kind of combining.
Well, three technically is France, Spain.
Yeah.
Italy.
So yeah, three countries combining to be one country, and you'd have to have either, you could do it one of two ways. You could do a referendum for every law, which I think would be rather inefficient, or you could do a referendum for a couple big things, like how the government's going to be structured.
So how would you suggest that the government be structured? Where would it sit? Would it sit in France? Would it sit in Spain? Or would it sit in Italy? How would you have the different Congress meeting? How would you have the different, let's say, provinces or representatives of the provinces meeting? Where would they meet? How would they meet? How often would they meet?
I think most governments generally meet nearly daily.
So you would have to ask people from Italy to travel to France or Spain, wherever you have it, or vice versa, to be able to talk about what laws and how to interact with each other.
I would personally, if you're just asking my personal opinion, I would set up a town dedicated just to, like, around the whole government body, similar to how Canada has Ottawa, and all of the politicians there, when they, for large portions of the year, live in Ottawa. And then there are portions of the year when they live in their separate provinces. Do something similar to that, just with the countries. So you have this.
So so I understand this and wrap my head around. So say, for instance, let's say for argument's sake, we put this town in France, for argument's sake. And that would mean that for the representatives that come from Italy as we know it, you would ask them to leave their country for at least 5 days a week, for instance, to live in France for those 5 days a week.
Yes, that would be part of the agreement. if
So
that's the
how would
case.
their localized government work if they have all of their politicians and representatives away for those 5 days?
The same way it works in any country. Like,
What, you mean you
how?
have the national government telling localized government what to do?
Yes.
Right. So
Yeah.
who would decide what laws are passed? Because if you have, let's say that you have 30 representatives from France, you have
Hmm.
30 representatives from Spain, and you have 30 representatives from Italy, for instance. So 90 in total. Let's say that
Yes.
Italy wants to make a trade deal with somebody else, but France and Spain don't. Does that mean because that they have more people representatives that are now on the same side, that Italy as themselves can no longer trade with countries that they want to?
Okay, but they're no longer separate countries. They're one country, so that trade agreement would
I
be among
understand.
all of them. So similar to, so like if the Conservative Party wanted to make a trade agreement with America and our Liberal NDP and Green Party didn't, um, then they wouldn't get to.
I
So
agree. I'm completely with you, but
yeah,
you're missing what my point was. That under that world government, that
yes,
international government that you're trying to create, that province, that country that wants to make its own version of trade deal, remember that it has its own economical structure, its own economical trade deals, its own structure of how it would integrate with Africa and other Middle Eastern countries and so on and so forth, would now be at the sole respect of France and Spain because they have more representatives. Is that the way that you'd want your government to be structured?
I guess essentially because that's how all governments are structured.
Yeah, but they're normally voted on by the nation. That's why nations work and globalized governments never would. Because you have the idea of the
No, they
nation.
the representatives from each country would be voted on by the people on a localized level. So you'd vote
I'm
for
not
whoever
talking
you
about the
think.
representatives. Not talking about the
Yeah.
representatives. I'm talking about what the representatives can do for the country, regardless of how the country would vote for their representatives. Because it would be voted inside government, wouldn't it? And if it wouldn't, then that means that you're then giving it to the vote of the Spanish people, the French people, and the Italian
Okay, but
people.
this is where this is no longer a globalized government. There's no longer a national government in any of these three countries. That's what I'm saying.
I agree, but they all have their trading economics, the same as Ottawa would have different trading agreements to how British Columbia would, because it would have more aspects of trade, more aspects with trade because it's more of a technological hub, Ottawa, compared to British
Yes,
Columbia, which is more rural. But that are
and
all controlled. That's all controlled locally and then
yes.
passed nationally. So how would you implement that on a Italian and France and Spanish level?
So Italy, France, and Spain would all be like provinces now.
Yes,
So similar to how Alberta can make trade agreements for Alberta and Ontario can make trade agreements for Ontario.
if the national government accepts it.
Yes.
Yes, which means that if Italy, as we're talking as they are now, want to make a trade agreement with the Middle East for oranges, for instance, but Spain that sells oranges decides that they cannot make an agreement because they want Italy to buy oranges from them as they're part of the same country and whatnot, then that means that they can block them from making that trade agreement.
Yes, but then they'd also lose any money from that trade agreement.
No,
So
no, they wouldn't. Italy would, because they would be forcing people to buy their own oranges from Spain. Because Italy wouldn't be able to trade with somebody that's selling their oranges for cheaper.
yes, what I'm saying is, by any tax revenue that would have come from them having that, they're also losing out on. Just like how if Ontario wanted to make a trade deal with America about oil, and Alberta said no, you can only buy oil from us, then Alberta would feel effects from that trade agreement as well.
How,
And
if they're
so
getting if they're getting all of the money from the US, how would Alberta or Canada lose that?
the same way that Italy would lose it. It's
No.
yes.
Alberta would be making money. It would be the US that loses money.
Okay, so I'm saying they work like provinces, so I guess uh Italy wants to trade with the Middle East, right?
Yeah.
And Spain says no, you have to buy from us.
Yeah, and France agree with Spain.
And France agreed with Spain.
Yes.
So if Ontario said I want to buy oil from America,
Yeah.
and Alberta said, no, you have to buy from us,
Yeah.
and BC agreed with Alberta, then you have the same situation. So either we can get rid of all government because all government is inefficient, and if you want to go that libertarian route, you can.
No.
Or you have to admit that that it's working the same as our current government's doing.
But it's not.
How is it not?
Because you have checks and balances. Say, for instance, with the point of using your system, you could have the Supreme Court then rule that Alberta cannot force the other provinces or whatever province it was to do that because it's against their rights to do it. But if you have 3 different countries, you can't work that out. It's the reason why the EU doesn't work.
No, but now France, Italy, and Spain are all their one country, so they'd have the checks and balances of one country.
Representative by their own countries, their own provinces, their own still being representative, which means that if you don't have a check and balance, which you haven't suggested one, then how do they sort out how they're going to trade compared to the other 2 countries or provinces stopping them from trading? Because you haven't proposed how that would work.
They can stop them. I can't. What do you? We just discussed that through the voting of the.
So that means that them 2 countries can stop Italy from making their own trading agreements under the provinces because they want them to do that. There's no checks and balances to say that those 2 provinces can't stop Italy making their own deals. The point that I'm trying to make is that under your Canadian government, you have a Supreme Court that can deem that unconstitutional. You can't do that in the position that you're saying. There's nothing to stop them from being able to say that that's unconstitutional.
Why not?
Because you have.
I already said. You want me to break down a constitution for the new governments?
No, you haven't suggested how that would work. I'm asking you to write out a whole constitution. I'm asking you how that you would be able to let Italy actually do that without the 2 actual other countries in the well-governed provinces stopping them from doing it.
So you would have to create a new constitution when these new countries were created, and you would have to have a new Supreme Court of these 3 countries, of representatives from these 3 countries, to decide whether or not whether the province of France, Italy, or Spain does something, whether or not it's constitutional or not.
So who decides? Because you're going to have the same legal representatives again in the Supreme Court. I'm guessing would be similar to the American Supreme Court. They would be nominated from the different provinces, I'm guessing, or the different parties, for instance.
Yes, they would be nominated. I would say they should be nominated from each province by the people of that province. So
how many? 10 from each province, or 5, or 2, or 1? The reason why I'm badgering is because I'm going to get to another point. This isn't the point. I'm just asking this kind of question to set up the next one.
Let's go with 5 from each province.
Okay, so that means that if France and Spain still agree, that means that they then outvote them 10-5, or however way you want to put it, 3-1 or 2-1.
Yeah. So same way any Supreme Court works.
So that means that that country is then forced, or that province is now then forced to deal with their own economic systems by being forced and told what to do by one government.
Yes, same way it works here in Canada, where we have systems in place where the national government can enforce other provinces to do things they don't want to do. So Alberta, they really hate that we have a redistribution system between our provinces where the nation can take income from one province and share it with another province, so that if there's one province that doesn't have any way of making a lot of money, they can still do things with taxes. They can still support the infrastructure they need to. Alberta hates that, but because the Supreme Court in Canada deemed it constitutional, there's nothing Alberta can do, and the Canadian government still gets to force them to do that.
Okay, so I suppose that the simple question is, what level of control should one government have? Say, for instance, you have a massive landmass of Canada and a massive landmass of
Mhm.
the US. How much government control should a landmass be able to control? Because that's the reason why they have their provinces, because they're such a big landmass.
Yes. Well,
So the
sorry.
reason why I asked
Provinces
that,
more have to do with how the country was created rather than um, having anything to do with size. So Canadian provinces are because of how Canada was created. So
I understand,
each,
but they're still
yeah,
ruled by provinces, don't they? They're still
did
governed
you,
in
yeah,
localizations of provinces, aren't they?
yes,
Same as states, technically.
yes, because what happened was each province used to be essentially its own country or its
Sure.
own, and then they combined through an agreement with Ontario. So Ontario and Quebec did the first agreement, and then they went to other provinces and they made an agreement, and so on and so forth until you have what is now Canada,
Sure. That's fine. My
which is
point is,
essentially what I'm suggesting doing just with countries now.
I understand, but the reason
Yeah.
why I'm saying that it doesn't work is because each and every country already has its own trade agreements, it already has its own way of living, it has its own culture, it has its own laws.
Yes.
Which means that you're going to try and say that what we're going to do is we're going to put you into the idea of being in a world government, but basically you can do what you want until we tell you otherwise.
That's how it's.
I don't want to live like that. At least I can vote for my own country to try and do something different. Where if you're in a world government or province system like that, you can't.
But you can, the same way that you can for your current government, you can do that with a world government.
No, you can't do it with a world government because you're up against so many other people that are also vying for their own economical purposes.
How many people are you up against right now in England?
About 65 million, give or take, children and whatnot.
Yeah, so you're currently up against 65 million people.
Yeah, that we have a voting system on, that
Yes.
everybody has an idea of what the economics are for that country. So that means
Yes.
that when we go against the European Union that tries to tell us that we need to buy places from France and other things like that, that we then lose our idea to being able to trade with the rest of the world because they're telling us what we can do rather than actually being sovereign and being on their own. But besides the point on the idea of the European Union and all that type of stuff, the point I'm actually making is that you have, let's say, Romania. They have different economical needs to the rest of Europe. So as they are still governed and able to make their own trade deals mostly by themselves to be able to either boost themselves up or lose themselves. At this moment in time, what you're proposing is that they wouldn't be able to make their own trade deals because it'd have to be voted on every time, which means that the country will suffer because the rest of the countries will want to do what's best for them.
Sorry, we're kind of jumping in between like time frames here, which is what's confusing me because sometimes we're talking about when the whole world is under one government, and what sometimes we're talking about it on where some countries are and some countries aren't. So
I'm using your example as a whole at this minute in time.
Okay.
To make it more easier and simple.
Okay.
If you have the idea of what you want, let's use Europe as the example as under one government to make it nice and easy as we've all got that.
Yeah.
If you have Holland and Romania that want to do something completely different to the rest of the EU, for instance, with Hungary, they don't want to take in refugees. Their prerogative, their country, they can do what they want with it. Not saying it's the good or bad thing, regardless. Yeah. But now the EU are forcing them to actually take in refugees and so on and so forth. Under your proposal of world government, that would be something that would be similar to what you're proposing, that they would have to be forced to do what they don't want to do under the same government, even though the people of that country voted against it.
Yes. So again, just like I'm going to go back to Canada because it's easy and I know it really well. Sure. If the national government here forced Alberta, who didn't want to take refugees, to take refugees.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can do that because it's a national government. Okay, what are you saying? You're saying so you're still sorry, 1 second. Itself. If I understand where you're at, oh whoops, sorry. We have some legs, so I don't know when you stop talking and when I start talking. So you're still under the whole, there's still, each nation has a government and they haven't, and they still have that global government above. They haven't combined into one country yet.
No, I'm still using the idea of the provinces. The same thing is that the provinces will still have the same economical problems and socio-economic problems that they already have. Same as you do in provinces. They still have the same problems regardless of where they are. For instance, as you were saying about Alberta, the Canadian government cannot force Alberta to take in Pacific amount of refugees. The government can say, we are all going to take in refugees. They can't force a singular province to say you're going to take it in.
Yes, I can.
I thought under the rights. I thought under the rights of your constitution that they wouldn't be able to do that because the Supreme Court would say that would be unconstitutional for the government to force them.
Oh no, our government has so much control.
No, I understand that. I understand that. But if you're saying that they can interfere with the idea of trade agreements, as you said with the Supreme Court before, then they would be able to do that for the implementation of the government saying, you yourself, province, Alberta, must take in these refugees.
Yeah, they could. The Supreme Court could if they deemed that unconstitutional.
So why would it be constitutional for your government specifically to say one province has to take in these amount of refugees and none other?
I guess because it's in the constitution that they can do that.
Well, in the UK, we don't have that separation. That would be unheard of, where we say that Birmingham or the county of Birmingham, where it is, I can't remember, Lancashire, I think, would have to take in a set number of refugees. The whole country would. So I don't understand when the singleization will come from, because wouldn't that be a basis of prejudice and be under the point of their own constitutional province rights?
Well, again, like I said, this would depend hugely on what the countries agree between them.
But you're saying that they're under the one world government, so it wouldn't matter what the countries agree with them, because we're bypassing that bit, remember?
But
we're bypassing
again,
that bit. They're on the one government and using your province.
By the time they're under one government, they would all have an agreed constitution for that one government, and depending on what that constitution says. So let's say that constitution does allow that the government of Europe, let's say Europe as a whole now is one government, and all the current countries of Europe are now provinces instead of countries.
How does trade work? Let's bypass politics. How would economic trade work? Because obviously, even with Europe, everything's still based by their countries.
Yes.
And then the provinces in the countries as well, or states in the countries. So how would economics work under your system? Because if it's under one world government or one world, then how would the proposed economics work? Because it would be under one currency, it would be under one sort of financial hub. Would there be lots of, as there is now, poor people, famine, stuff like that? Or do you think they would get better or worse?
There'd probably still be poor people, yes. Over time, you can work on that. Whether or not you implement communism or socialism.
Let's forget politics. Let's forget the politics. Let's just go with the point of economics. So if you have one singular world government, do you think that their focus would be on, saying, helping Africa if they got the rest of the westernized world to look after?
So the trade inside the European Union would still generate tax money and all that. I don't know why that would suddenly stop Europe from wanting to help other people.
Because Europe doesn't help other people, because Europe focuses on itself, because it's its own province. But it still has massive amounts of population. Like youth unemployment is on average around about, I think, 38% at the minute. I think unemployment is around about 34 to 36%, roughly on average in the European Union. So under one government, it's not doing very well for employment, is it? So how would that implement around the rest of the world? Because it's not going to be bothered about the places that are already shit. Excuse my French.
Sorry, can you rephrase the question? I'm just not quite.
So if you have one world government, let's say that it's based in Europe, it's going to focus on the people around Europe. You know, like most capital cities, say, for instance, as you probably know, Quebec is probably one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest city in Canada. The same as it is in Barcelona and Madrid. The same as it is in Paris. So that means that the economical systems around that get really, really poor. So if you have your economical hub, let's say in Europe, then that means that all the countries around Europe will probably lose their economical funding, don't you think? Lose their trading. because that's just the way that countries seem to function.
So, sorry, you're saying the rich countries would lose their leverage because
No. I'm saying that the rich countries, Europe and everything else like that, or let's say US, would
Okay.
massively gain in. Let's use a whole continent.
Yeah.
Continent of America, so North and South America, because the financial hub, let's say, is in right bang in the middle. Let's say Texas. Let's say that whole continent will probably do really well prosperously. Probably do really well, the whole continent. But then Africa won't. The Middle East won't. Most of Europe probably won't.
They're currently not doing well.
What do you mean?
Yeah,
what, Europe?
Like Africa isn't doing well right now.
No, I agree, but they would do even worse because they wouldn't have localized government that would be able to tell the rest of the world what they need. Because the good thing about localized countries is that they can work out what they need for themselves, rather than a whole government that's a world away looking at them going, yeah, we're not that bothered.
See, but what would happen if, let's say, you have all of Africa one government, and all of Europe another government, all of Asia another government? Let's say each continent is its own government at this point.
Then that's not a world government.
Okay, so sorry, you want the whole, all of Earth, one government now?
I'm going by what you said.
I'm just trying to understand what time frame we're working with, because it's not going to be all of a sudden one world government. So the whole world is under one world government, meaning that they can distribute resources as needed to these other countries.
Focus on their capital cities, like they do in every other country. Or do you think that humanity would change just because that they have a bigger world to look after?
I don't think a world government would fundamentally change society. I'm saying we need to fundamentally change society to have a world government.
No, that's fine. But my point still remains. Even if you were to change the idea of society, as in everybody would help everybody. Let's just say that everybody's changed the whole DNA and genetic makeup on social, political makeup and whatnot. Let's just say that happens. Why would people in America want to look after people that are in Africa? And let's even simplify it even more. Why would people in South Africa as a country want to look after people in Namibia?
So we still have a world government, so we still have tax revenue, meaning that the better other provinces do, the more tax revenue it takes in.
But you're under the idea of trading doesn't cost any money anymore, or it doesn't make a profit anymore.
Oh, sorry, we're already
no,
there.
I'm going by what you said. I'm trying to follow what your logic is. Because you're trying to say that we should have by the time that we implement this free world government now, or free continent government, you would already have the idea of trade would obviously be a point of freedom of movement. There would be under conscription of the idea of being able to have free trade and free movement, and the idea of, I'm guessing, limited currency that wouldn't work as it does now? Or would it still be the same version of currency?
If you want me to give you my perfect utopian world, I can.
I just want you to be consistently logical, that's all, with your point.
Well, you see, the problem I'm having here is that I'm speaking on like multi-100-year time frame. So when I'm answering your questions, I'm trying to understand which part of the time frame we're talking here. So
I was trying to stick to your idea of the world government in itself. So the whole idea of the world government.
Yeah, but
we can stick to the free continent one if you want to, because that probably make more sense to most people.
Yeah.
So let's stick with the free governments. So let's use Africa as the prime example, because I think it would be the most easiest. Let's say that you have the capital city of, I don't know, let's say Egypt. Yeah. Why would Egypt care about what happens in South Africa? Or even in the middle of the Congo?
So, again, because helping them helps themselves in this.
Well, if they stick to the provinces that you said that they're going to be having, because they still have their economical trade, so the capital cities would still be great. It's the same reasons why capital cities don't look after the slums now. You can take that to any point in any country.
Yes, no, I know. I do have to think through like what you're saying and what I'm gonna respond with, so I can.
No, that's fine. I understand.
Yeah. 1 second here.
Yep.
So you're saying that wealth would still be concentrated into the capital cities, and the governments would still want to help those capital cities more, right?
Overwhelmingly, yes.
Yeah. So if you have a world government, what you can do is you can implement things like Canada has, where you have wealth redistribution. I'm trying not to get too much into like communist thought here, because
No, that's fine. If you want to say that you redistribute the wealth, all you're doing is take it. Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
So
I can take that. I can take that and still run with it. I understand it. You're going to redistribute the wealth from the rich countries, the rich provinces, to the smaller provinces and the weaker provinces, so to speak, economically.
That's correct.
But all that does is make everybody poor. That doesn't make the financial hubs or the capital cities any richer, does it?
It does, though, because what happens when you give wealth more to the poor, they end up spending more.
You can only spend what you're given. So if you're taking money from the rich to give it to the poor, you still have the same circular amount of money going in. You're not making any more money. So you're not getting any richer.
Okay, but the rich don't spend it anyways. So
if they don't spend it, how does the money make its tax revenue?
It doesn't, because under our current system, they aren't.
So no rich people pay tax anywhere. I'm not saying that the tax systems anywhere is perfect. I'm saying that you think that the rich don't pay any tax?
Not any significant amount.
So 20% or 50% or whatever it is. I think anybody that earns over, I think 100 grand has to pay 40% of their income tax. That's just income tax in the UK.
Yeah.
So that's not even talking about corporation tax if you earn money. You honestly think the rich people don't pay their fair share?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, let's say that they don't pay their fair share. How would it be implemented in different governments that they do pay their fair share?
You can do a marginal tax rate, so any income above a certain amount gets taxed at a higher amount than the money below that.
You're just repeating what I just said, and you're saying that they don't work.
No, I'm saying that you increase the amount of taxes.
Yeah, but you're saying that even if you increase the amount of taxes, as if you have a marginal tax rate of 40% of over 100 grand, that you would want to increase that, but you're also saying that people that do pay that are not paying their fair share. Why is a 40% of 100 grand, as well as it being how many percentage it is marginally up to that 100 grand, not paying their fair share?
I'm not talking about people at like 100 grand.
Okay, even if it's 40% of a million, they're still paying a percentage of what it is.
Yes, because when you look at it, they benefit more from the society than the society benefits from them.
No, they don't. They don't benefit from society because society is not giving them money. They are providing a product and society is paying them for the product. That's not them benefiting from society. Benefiting from society is literally getting benefits from the country.
Yes. So again, rich people, they do benefit from society, and it's not just they provide a product. Most wealth is inherited.
Yeah, and most inherited wealth changes. So just because you inherit something doesn't mean that you keep it. You can look at any inherited wealth. Look at what's her name, Lisa Presley, or the daughter of Elvis Presley. She has no money anymore. It's gone.
Yes.
Inherited wealth changes all the time. You have to work at it to keep it.
Yes, but most wealth is inherited, not earned. So it's mostly not.
Any statistics for that?
I can see if I can find my source for you.
Because I'd be very interested, and even if it is a case of most wealth is inherited, that would mean that even me that's going to get money from my dad, for instance, I would get wealth from my inheritance.
Yes. But what we're talking about is millionaires. I think it's something like 60% of millionaires are made millionaires from inherited wealth.
So how would a millionaire be made a millionaire?
Depends on where you're looking. Most of the time, it was inherited through systems similar to slavery.
So people nowadays that are now still earning inheritance from slavery.
Yes.
Okay.
This.
Even though it ended 100 and something years ago in the US and it ended
Yes.
120, 110, 130 years in the UK, they're still getting inheritance from it.
Yes.
Okay, so what do you want to do?
Take it away from them.
So you want to rob them of their money?
Sure, why not?
So I can rob you for anything then, or is it only rich people that we can rob?
I would say only rich people, but if I mean you can.
Why would I want to rob something? That means that there is no personal property anymore. That means that you have no way of earning anything, which means that your world government in itself completely collapses simply because human nature is, I want what you've got. And if I'm allowed to rob it from the rich, that means that you can no longer then claim taxes off them because they're no longer rich. So how would that work?
1 second here. My your audio is cutting out. I'm going to see if there's anything I can do about that.
Sorry. But basically, my main point on this was that if you're saying that you're going to take money from the rich, I won't even use the word rob. If you're going to take money from the rich, why is it okay to take money from the rich, but I can't take money from you?
I don't really have any money to give you, so there's a start.
I don't care. I want your Xbox. I want your computer.
You want my what?
I want your Xbox. I want your computer. I want what you're using now, your phone. Why can't I do that, but I can take their money?
So you want like the moral argument for it?
No, I want your argument. Why is it that I can take you saying that I can take money off of the rich, but I can't take stuff off of you?
Well, this is essentially a moral argument, I guess. So, the argument would be because they didn't earn it.
But they did earn it, even though even if you're saying it's through slavery, which I completely not agree is an abhorrent way to earn money. They still earn money, even if it's off the back and taking advantage of people to do it. They still earn the money, and all of them are not profiting from slavery now. So you'd have to work out what money was profited from slavery, and then try and work out what the percentage was to try and take it back, which still is robbing them of their money.
Or you could look at it as giving the money back to those they took it from, because when you...
So you're a believer of reparations?
Yes.
Why? Why should people that weren't even involved 100 years ago get money for something that they have not experienced or been a part of?
Because they still benefit from the
So does the rest of the world with white slavery, especially in the Middle East. Should they pay us reparations, or is it only black people that get reparations?
Anywhere that had slavery should have to pay reparations.
So everywhere in the whole country, everywhere in the whole world should pay reparations?
Yes.
Okay, how do you work that out?
A lot of math. I can't do it right now.
No, but I mean, how would you work out what country earned the most from reparations? How would that country then pay it back to the people that they've actually done it? Who does the money actually go to?
Okay, we'll use Germany as an example for this, because they paid huge reparations after World War II.
Yeah, only to living descendants and people that were actually involved. I've read all the literature on it. They did not pay anybody apart from literal living descendants. And the only person that they did pay that wasn't a living descendant was the daughter of a living descendant that they said they were going to pay, but couldn't because she died.
So we could do that.
But there is no living descendants of slavery. There is none.
Yes, there is.
So who lives over 100 years old?
There's people who were born as children at the end of slavery who still alive.
Who was actually born as a child that's still alive today?
I can't remember their name right now.
So you want to give all of them that one person money? And she's not a living descendant. She was a child right at the end of slavery after it was after they had their emancipation. I believe that she actually died in 1998-ish or 2004-ish.
I might have misread the article, but give me 1 second here.
I'm pretty sure she died in 2004.
That could be. Anyways, you
But
could
then there's no
even.
living descendants, then, is there?
But then you have to also keep in. So let's stick with America for now because we're talking about American slavery. There's
no
also
living descendants anywhere.
Yes.
Of slavery.
Anyways, so you still have Jim Crow laws, which
So now we're paying reparations from Jim Crow laws where people are actually allowed to make their own money just separate.
Jim Crows didn't.
They did. They made their own money in segregated areas. They were entitled to their own money.
That's
just
not
where
what.
segregated.
Okay, so when we say when Jim Crow laws are more than just Jim Crow laws are more than just segregation. Jim Crow laws were the systemic laws put in place to stop Black people from being able to participate in society.
No,
so
they
it's
were
not
segregating them. They were able to do what they wanted in their own communities, but they weren't allowed to do it in white communities. They did not stop them from participating in society as a whole, just integrating with white people, specifically in US law. That's the reason why they were able to go to certain restaurants with a wall in the middle of it to go black this side, white this side, where they had water fountains that said black this way, white this way, blacks at the back, whites at the front. They were segregated. They weren't excluded.
They were excluded, though. There's more to the Jim Crow laws than just segregation.
I understand that, but you're suggesting that the whole thing is that they were excluded from society. They weren't. They were separated from society, saying that you can make whatever you want in your own community, just not this community. That's the reason why there are millionaires from Joe Crow era. That's why they have their own businesses in the Jim Crow era. Sorry, not era.
I was going to say Jim Crow area.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was I saying again? I had a thought and I lost it.
Sorry, you were saying about how that they were segregated, not segregated, they were excluded from society.
Yes. So you also have to, we're talking about this like slavery and Jim Crow are completely separate things. The reason I brought up Jim Crow was because it was the extension of slavery.
Okay, I'll just let that go. Carry on.
So you have slavery. Slavery ends, sort of. Slavery sort of ends. It's ended until it officially ended. When did it officially end again? I'm forgetting the year.
1876.
Yeah, something like that. It officially ended somewhere around there. You still had slavery going on into the 1900s.
Did you also know that you had in southern areas up to 1883 black Republican congressmen?
Yes.
Okay, so just continue.
So you had slavery going into the 1900s. So if we're just talking living descendants of slavery,
but they weren't actually slaves. Yeah. They were economic slaves. They weren't actually slaves, were they?
Not of chattel slavery.
No.
Yeah.
Cattle slavery is what you mean.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
I've only ever seen it written.
Yeah, it's cattle.
Yeah, cattle slavery.
Like the cows, cows.
Yeah. So, I guess if you want to define slavery that stringently, no, there's no living relatives of slavery.
Okay.
However, there's a ton of different forms of slavery, and it's not just cattle slavery. It's
sure. There's indentured slavery, which affected white, servants, blacks, and everybody.
Yes, but it was systematically targeting black people.
No, there was actually more white indentured slaves than there was black indentured slaves. There are definitely tons more black slaves that were cattle slaves, sure. But if you want to talk indentured slavery, whites piss all over them, unfortunately.
We're still talking about the U.S.?
Everywhere, but specifically the U.S.
Okay.
I'm quite happy with you. I'm quite happy with you checking it.
Yeah, just gotta.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm quite happy with you checking that. Yes, Irish, Italian, Jewish. You even had English and Canadian at one point. They were in the US as well.
Yes, Canada has a huge history with that. Let's see. I'm lazy, so I'm just going to use Wikipedia for now.
Sure. Remember, we're talking about indentured slavery as it is, as a whole, not including chattel slavery and comparing the two, because we've already said that chattel slavery pisses all over indentured. But the two, whites unfortunately win on that one. Oh, you also have Russians as well, Ukrainians.
Yes.
Oh, Polish. They were a massive one as well. Norwegians, Holland. I could go on. Or we could continue the conversation and take it on good faith. But I'm pretty sure you'll find the exact same thing that I'm talking about.
Sure, we'll go with good faith.
You can check if you want while you're still talking.
Well, I have ADHD. I can't talk and read at the same time.
No, that's fair enough. So, okay, let's say that it was even. Let's say indentured slavery was even between whites and people of color. Let's say that. Who should get reparations, and how do you prove what reparations were given to those people?
I think both groups should get reparations. Anyone who is an indentured servant should get reparations.
Even when they run out of their contract and actually were able to earn money afterwards?
Yes.
So would they have to pay their money back for their contract, or?
No.
Okay, so what they're doing is paying back a contract that they were when they indentured. In other words, they had a bill to pay. Like, have you ever tried to run out of a restaurant and got caught because you didn't have enough money and they asked you to wash dishes?
No.
So have you ever known anybody that's done that?
No.
Okay, well, I've done that, and I've had to wash dishes because of paying for the meal. I had to do around about 2 hours work. That would be me being an indentured slave.
Yes.
So should I get reparations?
Yeah, probably. You did work for free.
Why? I was paying back for a meal that I owed.
So, the only way I can see that would have been okay would have been if they had paid you and then you gave the money back. Because essentially,
I was just going to say, what logic is that? So they would give me money for me to pay them back because I had to pay them money back to begin with?
Yes. So that's essentially what we're talking about. But when we talk about indentured slavery, we're talking about prisoners who usually did fairly common...
That they still do today, even though they get paid a pittance, which is technically their payback to society, which I'm not a big fan of, but it's still not slavery.
They commit some sort of minor crime and they have to do.
They don't have to. They don't have to. They are asked if they want to, and they actually are paid money for doing it, especially now. Now, if you're talking about chain gangs back in the day, then yeah, fair enough. They were technically indentured slavery, but they were paying for what they were actually using in the prison. That's why they were part of the chain gangs.
Sorry, did you say they were paying for what they were using in the prison?
Yes, that's what the prison was doing for them, paying for their pillows and toothbrushes and toothpaste and toilet roll and whatnot.
Yeah, no, that's wrong.
No, I agree, it's wrong.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. Like chain gangs, where essentially, you commit some sort of crime and you have to do the work.
Sure. And most of those people have had some form of reparations, but most of them haven't, and simply because that they were in prison for committing a crime and were paying back some sort of form of debt to society. Still not a form of slavery that deserves reparations, though, is it?
It is.
Why? If they're paying back their debt to society for committing a crime?
Because they're...
And why should I pay for them to have reparations? Because remember, the government is the one that's paying them reparations, which means my tax dollars, whatever, money is coming out.
Yes.
So why should I pay for it?
Well, because you're part of the country, I guess. You're part of the country that benefited from it.
Well, I wasn't part of the country that when it actually happened done it. So why should I pay for it?
Because so in a world government, because you're still benefiting from it. If that country benefits from it and you benefit from that country, you're still benefiting from that.
But I'm not. Because nobody benefits from slavery now apart from the Middle East and North Africa, as it's still going on.
But you do. You still slavery is a large reason why economically the US did so well, but why economically Europe did so well, why economically so many of what the global north.
Well,
that's why the global north.
Do you know why one of the main reasons why slavery was abolished, apart from the fact of people realizing that they were human beings and whatnot?
And are we talking like which country are we talking? Because it was abolished for.
There was the major point of the reason why slavery was abolished in most places was because economists come out and actually said that what they were doing was not actually doing any good. They weren't actually making any profit from it. Because if you were to pay people a profit, you would actually get better work from it. So that's one of the main reasons why it got phased out, so to speak.
Just so you know, I can't talk much longer, but yeah.
Okay, let's forget reparations then. Let's go back to the actual border and the actual point of the discussion. Let's forget reparations. So let's forget about world governments. Let's go back to the actual point of why you don't like borders and the way that we should deal with immigrants now.
Why we should?
How?
We should
not why.
How? Sorry, I heard why.
Sorry.
How we should deal with immigrants now. Well, generally, I would say just accept them because they economically do more good than harm.
Everyone?
Oops, something happened here.
You're still here, so it's fine.
Okay, good.
So should we accept everybody that ever wants to comment, including criminals, rapists, terrorist groups?
You don't have to. If there's open borders, then I guess, yeah, because there's no borders to stop them. Same as how if a criminal wanted to go from Alberta to Ontario, they could. I don't think you should. Yeah, I don't think.
But if you were convicted, you couldn't, though, could you?
Yeah, if we talking like convicted? Are we talking convicted
without letting the state know that you're moving?
Like, are we talking convicted went to jail and is out now, or convicted and is going to jail or court or something soon?
To be fair, I think the point that I was making is irrelevant anyway. I don't think it's a point worth dying on.
Yeah.
To be fair. But,
yeah.
Okay, so you don't have people that have already committed crimes that are being reported. Does that mean that we should open the borders up to people that may do, and we shouldn't check the people that are coming in, if we can?
Well, again, we allow in Canada, at least. I don't know whether or not it's true for England and other parts of the world as well. Even if, let's say, you're on some sort of watch list in Canada, you can still move freely between provinces. Because on a provincial level, we understand that no matter what province
you're... I'm talking about international now. Sorry, my mistake.
Yeah.
I'm talking about people that are trying to emigrate to the country, that are actual immigrants that are trying to come into the country, not people that are in the country trying to move around in the country.
Yeah, so I think right now it's fine if you want to just make sure the person isn't a criminal.
Well, seems like I've lost Todd, unfortunately, on that one. It seems like he may have disappeared. Does anybody else want to come on, have a chat, see what's going on and whatnot? It seems to have gone quite well. To be fair, I hope that he can come back. I hope that it's not just his time that's run out, because I'm pretty sure that he was saying that the time was running out in itself. So it may not have been the best time for him to be able to come on. So maybe that's the problem. I don't know. If there is a problem, then hopefully he will get back in touch with me and we can do this again. But if anybody wants to come on and shoot shit for another half hour, then I'm more than happy to have somebody come on and do that. I can send them the link if they want to come on and have a chat with me. Be interesting to see what you guys think about what the conversation was and how it went. So yeah, if any of you want to get in contact with me on Twitter or wherever, just let me know and I will send you the link and you can come on and we can have a quick chat. Other than that, I will have to probably get off, I think. Just got a message saying he thinks that he got disconnected. So I think that it's just an internet thing. So never mind on that one. So hopefully people will maybe get in contact with me, maybe send me a message on Facebook if you're on Facebook and following me there as well. I can send you a link if you want to from that side. I'd be quite happy to have a chat with anyone, to be fair. So if anybody wants to come on, please feel free. And I'm kind of dying with nothing to go on. I was expecting this to go for a little bit longer, to be fair. So if anybody wants to come on, just get in contact with me, let me know. Or if you've got any questions in general. Yeah, see, Todd just sent me another message saying that he's got disconnected. So he's just got disconnected. If he wants to come back on, he's more than welcome to if he's got enough time as well. So that's all good. So, right. Does anybody have any questions at all or anything else like that? If not, I will get off. And the questions can be about anything that they want to. So if you want to talk about this, then feel free. If you want to talk about something that you want to ask me, then feel free. More than happy to talk to anybody at the minute about anything. So be quite happy. Just having a look around and seeing what's about. So should be okay. If anybody wants to come on, please feel free. Nah, I don't think anybody wants to come on, so never mind. Well, in that case, then, if nobody gets in contact with me very shortly, or if Todd doesn't get back in contact with me saying that he's coming on or not coming on, then I will get off because I don't think there's any point me rambling at this minute in time. Who's back from the wedding? What wedding? What are you on about? What wedding? What are you doing? Memes of Destruction, would you like to come on and talk about immigration and borders at all? Because unfortunately, the person I was talking to seemed to have got disconnected by something. So if anybody wants to come on, I would be more than happy for them to come on. More than happy. Other than that, I am going to get off, I think. Sure, I will send you the link on Twitter then, Memes. If I can find you on Twitter. It's been a while since I messaged you. I have sent you the link on Twitter, so you're more than welcome to come on, and I'll sort that out for you. Cape Wedding. So, yeah, I mean, what do you guys think? The ones that are still here and watching and listening and whatnot, did you think that was a productive conversation? Do you think we went anywhere or did anything? Did you think it was interesting? Was I too aggressive in how I spoke, or was I okay? What way do you reckon it went? Just let us know. Did you think that we covered what we should have covered, or do you reckon that we deviated heavily as most people tend to do, and rather than dealing with the topic that we put on, actually delved into the weeds, so to speak, of the politics behind the issue, rather than actually just trying to deal with the actual issue? Do you think that was a problem here? Because I do think that was a problem. I think that we delve too much into politics rather than trying to deal with the borders and how to deal with the borders now and what to do with them. I think I blame myself on that aspect. I mean, we went in to talk about bloody racism and the idea of racism and slavery and reparations and stuff like that. So I think that's more on me than anything, to be fair. I do think that that's definitely a problem and something that I probably should have realised and probably should have reined in a little bit more and tried to bring us back on topic. But hopefully if Memes comes on, if he's ready, then we can have a quick conversation, and Memes of Destruction is coming on and I will add him to the stream and we're here and we're live and I have a friend. How you doing, Memes? Oh, I can't hear you. Can people let me know if you can hear Memes of Destruction or not? Because unfortunately I can't hear him. Hang on just a second. Technology, games, it's all theory. He left me. He left me. Thank you very much for saying that, RPR. I don't necessarily think that he was out of his depth. I would try
Can you
and
hear me now?
suggest that maybe
Yes. No.
I can hear you.
Oh my god!
Yes.
Oh my god! Well, I was busy noobing it up. Yeah, no, I just got back from my buddy's wedding down in the Cape, which we massholes up here like to refer to as the Florida and the tropics, according to the memes. The world of a masshole. If you Google that and look at images, you will find what I'm talking about. Out west, Darby Dragons. So it also works. So CSG, yeah, no, I caught a little bit on the way back when we were driving up. Yeah, so I heard some chatting. It seemed to be a very thoughtful chat about basically immigration. It sounded like he kind of brought up some points and stuff, but
I think we got into the weeds.
Well, that's never happened on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, it was my. I could have quite easily said this is probably not what we were discussing, but you get into the moment and you lose sight of what the actual topic is, and then you try and defeat ideology rather than the topic. And
yeah, well, that's the point where you go from having a discussion to kind of going into debate. And like I actually struggled with this for a couple of seconds the other day when I went to when POTUS was having the rally up in Manchester and stuff. I was going to do a few man on the street things, and I looked over. I'm like, oh, that's Dr. Shiva. I haven't seen him in over like a year. So I go over, talk to him, and we got a little thing, and he kind of brought up the whole like climate change thing. He's like, it's the biggest fraud and stuff. And I'm like, he started to bring up the models. I'm like, should I bring up the R1 through R3 models and then basically kind of disprove him in some way? I'm like, we're going to get into a debate then. And to be fair, I did approach him and ask him his thoughts on what was going on for the day. So, but okay, so what is the topic? We're talking immigration? Or?
Well, I was more thinking about how we can deal with specifically the US border and how.
Which one?
Well, the South, obviously. Okay. Apparently, the North isn't a problem. Apparently, according to everybody, it's the South for some reason.
I feel a lot of the issues that seem to be a major impasse as far as going on the southern border of the United States happen. And with all due respect, nothing against UCSG, the fact that so many people other than the folks living on the border on the US and Mexico side are giving their 2 cents and saying, this is how it must be, which now you're going from millions of people trying to make decisions for millions of folks within that area to upwards of 1 billion plus people saying, no, do it this way, not do it this way, no, do it this way.
Yeah. I don't know. I agree. It's the same with gun control. We have so many UK citizens at the minute talking about gun control and whatnot. And I do think it's an interesting topic for people to discuss. But when you're literally telling Americans, like from the UK, that you should do it this way, it's like, but you get pissed off when they tell you should have stayed in your bit of politics that you dislike them having a bit in when they don't agree with you. So. Yeah.
Well, actually, to go off into the weeds for about 2.5 steps, just for a second, on that, on the topic of firearms in regards to the U.S., dude. And again, this is just my basic gist of what I took away from just the folks that I spoke to at that particular rally. Is I seriously think a lot of more Republican-ish, conservative-ish type folks, or at least individuals whom were supporting the president on that day, I think a lot of them are open to firearms reform, which was actually very surprising because that was something I brought up, the sheer fact that the president was talking about red flag laws, which to me do seem to be kind of a major. I mean, the president, I feel, has infringed upon the Second Amendment. I believe it was 8 Jack, or my apologies if I got whoever it was wrong that was pointing this out to me, and maybe it was Taryn Marine, that basically a bump stock is actually an accessory. So if you're going to consider it an actual firearm, it's an accessory. But I'm like, at that same time, I can kind of get what you're saying. It's kind of like, all right, you have your gaming console, but if you don't have the controller, it would basically be like an additional, like the little like duck hunt thing or something like that. It's an additional thing. Oh, I do like that analogy.
Oh, no, I completely agree. I mean, I know that we both know people that are very avid Second Amendment upholders, and I'm not saying you're not either. Just the interpretation may be slightly different and the meaning behind it, maybe. I don't know. I'm not going into that bit. But I find it very interesting that when people bring up, well, maybe we should have mental health checks for when you buy a gun. And then people go, no, that's just a way of being able to stop the common citizen from buying one. It's like, I see your point, but don't you think that there should be some more legislation to maybe, you know, make it harder for mentally challenged people getting it?
What you run into is we're trying to solve a particular issue that we see, because let's face it, man, if you turn on TV and you see a bunch of folks are murdered, that's fucking horrible, and nobody with any true conscience really wants to see anything like that happen.
No, of course not.
But then we're trying to solve it by basically coming at it from one particular angle.
Agreed.
And the problem is, if we do it from that angle, now we're also not necessarily doing what we should for the mental health angle. Because one of the big things, at least in our country, is there is a massive stigma with coming forward if you have any type of problem. Like, if all of a sudden, like, if you happen to lose your leg or you lose a hand, or like my old man, he lost the end of his thumb while he was in the service. But it's like, if you have something like that happen, it's like, okay, people can physically see that. They understand that. But then you have a lot of folks that have to come back from either a combat zone, or maybe they have something that happens in their own particular lives that basically did affect them in some way. Yeah. And it's an unknown scar. So now the problem is,
unseen, not unknown, unseen.
Exactly. Thank you for the correction, sir. But the problem is, if you all of a sudden you're going to put in those red flag laws, now you're going to have somebody that maybe was considering coming forward to try to get some help for something. Now say, wait, I'm going to lose my firearms. I'm going to lose my Second Amendment right if I do that. So now we're discouraging it. So now we're having folks that likely could use some help not receive said help, and it's just. It's more complicated. There are many factors that are going on there, and it ain't easy, because if it was easy, hopefully we'd already had it solved.
Oh, no, I completely agree with you, and I do see where most Americans go, well, if you put that in, then it can be misused and mishandled. I can see that, and I do understand that, and let's be honest, nobody really trusts government to 100%. They always do something wrong, somewhere, somehow. But when it comes to the point, why don't they put I know it's easy for some fucking UK citizen guy to go, oh, they should do this. But what if, when they did the actual idea of implementing the mental health, a mental health check, that if they found something like PTSD, for instance, as we were just hinting on, why can't they then go, well, with help, you can do this? Because obviously it's a condition where you can help. So why can't you then have that? I know it's a condition, and I know it's then, well, that's stipulated then, and then you're telling the person that you have to have this to get this. I do understand that, but then wouldn't that stop quite a lot of the 17, 18, and 22s and the 25-year-olds from going, I'm going to get a gun and I'm going to go shoot up some Hispanics, or I'm going to be a socialist and I'm going to shoot up everybody because I dislike my sister? I mean, surely there's some form of mental health thing that we can do there. Surely, with checking up or routine systems or something, surely.
The issue you have with that is, again, let's say you're in the NFL, you get injured or something, and they say it's this tendon. You can physically go in there and inspect it, and there'll always be some folks that are suspect whether said athlete is fully recovered from their injury, but that's something we have the ability to verify fairly well. Whereas if it's doing something with your head, it's just like, that's much harder. And again, that stigma will always stick to you. It's just like, if you happen to be accused of a serious crime, there will always be some out there that will see you as the person that did this thing. So
I completely agree, but it doesn't have to necessarily be something that you disclose for the public. Because if it's something, if you let me finish, if it's something where you're going to apply for a gun license to be able to buy a gun, for instance, then you get to the point of having a mental health check, and then the psychologist looks at you and goes, you have this type of issue. I think that you're going to be okay, but I would like you to have a little bit more of a, let's say, I don't know, a couple of sessions, for instance, to work out what level of PTSD that you have, or whatever it is, to work out what level it is, and then work it out from there, and then keep it quiet rather than going, he's got mental health problems, he can't have a gun.
I mean, I'm trying to play that through. It's just a lot of folks, if that happens, they feel like they're kind of becoming a victim, because in some way they are, because one of their constitutionally guaranteed rights is being infringed upon by the judgment of another individual. No, but I started, as you were saying that, I thought of that, but then I bridged that out and I thought, okay, so what happens if we do have somebody that did serve overseas, that was part of our military services, and if you were to implement that, what would be a way that would actually make sense, that would make that person not necessarily feel like they were being targeted? It would have to specifically come from the community. And I think this applies to many different things, where it's like, if you had somebody actually within your unit and stuff that you had served with, and somebody like, hey, listen, man, I think maybe you should hold off on this right now. You know what? Let's go practice at the range. We'll practice at the range. We'll do some things. And if you had it more of a consultative rather than, but then again, I mean, that's the same with everything. If it's coming from somebody you feel it's coming from a good place, people are okay with it. Whereas it's this just anonymous figure in the bureaucracy in the shadows that you don't know. And even if they're trying to do their best, the fact that the person can't identify them, they're just this mysterious person that just sends us this letter saying you have a hold on your purchase of this firearm. I mean, they don't know who it is. They have no context for that. So it's one of those things where a lot of that should really be taken care of within the standard FBI background checks. And from a number of the folks that I spoke to, most folks aren't really basically having a form of universal background check. I understand back in the day, if you happen to have somebody that was selling a firearm at like a gun show or something like that, if you weren't a large vendor that were actually at your own store, because I think a lot of this came from, before to do the background check, you'd have to call on the old school analog line to the FBI department. You take like 20, 30 minutes. They do a quick check in their systems and everything, and they come back, okay, this person is clear, or no, we have a hold on this person. So that was how it was done back in the day. But to do it at a gun show, if you just have folks come from all around, that may be more difficult. My feeling is we now have the technology with mobile that it becomes, to do it universally, that may be within the scope of what we would consider a reasonable regulation, which is something we already have. Because even like down in Florida, I think they have a 3 to 5 day waiting period. So you go to the store, you basically put down either your deposit or this is the weapon I'm going to be basically purchasing, and gives them a couple of days. So basically, like, if all of a sudden something happened, somebody was really mad and they're like, you know what, I want to go get these people. So rather than just going out buying a gun and murdering people, they have a couple of days. So it's like, yeah, I don't want to throw away the rest of my life just because I'm pissed off. It's like, why am I going to murder people because I was drunk or high? Come on. So it's like,
and the difference on that though means that most of the, let's use the term mass shooter, and I mean the actual mass shooters, not the 3 or more. I mean the ones that we hear in the news all the time. That most of them are premeditated. They're not a spur of the moment thing. They're premeditated, they're planned. Whether people want to believe that they're planned good or bad, it doesn't matter. They are premeditated, they are planned. Some of them are planned within months of doing things. So I agree that it stops the people going out and going, oh, I want to kill this person. Sure, wouldn't stop mass shootings. Now, again, I don't think any sort of gun regulations would anyway, because if you get to the point where you're going to go into a place and just try to commit as much terror as possible, you're going to use anything to be able to do it, as you used to have massive amounts of pipe bombs that used to be around anyway, especially in the US. Or you have the idea of, you know, I've got a truck. It's peaceful.
Yeah, and apparently there's some rice cookers that were getting found in New York City, and as somebody that's from the greater Boston area that has had fellow citizens murdered, utilizing similar devices and stuff.
Sorry, I just wanted to correct somebody in the chat. When I said actual news mass shooters, I didn't mean that the news was actually reporting on them. I mean the ones that we notoriously, should we say, think of when we think of mass shooters. The ones that are prevalent in our brain because they have been produced so much.
Yeah, obviously. I think CSG was referring to more of the things that are heavily covered by the news, often large scale, often utilizing long barrel rifled with multiple casualties. Because I believe it's the FBI definition is 4 more individuals injured in the discharge of a firearm, basically. So that's
Depending on
technically
state.
so it gets mixed up.
Actually, it's depending on state, to believe it or not.
Okay.
Some of it's three or more people that are not known to each other, and in some states it's 4 or more people, not including the shooter.
Yeah, because my big thing is, and that's one of the issues you run into with statistics. That's why I tend to say 80% of statistics are BS, because depending on how you frame it, depending on how you're modeling, and you change a word or two here or there, you can show to present almost anything you want. Then you cut off the size of the chart or the graph, so it looks steeper, it looks lower, and then it has an iceberg effect. But
look how we had our conversation about what was it? Prison control, and if federally people should be able to get the rights to be able to vote and why they're in prison. Look how we both had a look at the Wikipedia page that you presented and how you had your interpretation of reading it, then I had mine, and then we went through it and we're like, that's what it actually means. So yeah, everybody can misinterpret reading facts. And I wasn't bringing it up to go, memes didn't know what he meant. It was more of a case of everybody with the goodest of will impossible can just look at something and go, that's what I think, and fuck you guys. And again, that's not what you did.
Oh, dude, and the sourcing makes so much of a difference because, dude, I had this, what was it? It was with Cabby and Optimus one day, and they were talking about something about fiat currency, and their discussion, I'm like, they're like arguing just around like a central core. I'm like, what are they missing? So I bring up Merriam-Webster, and I bring up Oxford English Dictionary. And of course, if you looked at the initial definitions, there was a very small difference in the verbiage between Oxford and Merriam-Webster. And of course, Cabbage, his argument was true when based off of Oxford English Dictionary, and this was correct when you go off of Merriam-Webster. So I'm just looking at this, I'm like, this is what you guys are arguing about. At least this is what it looks like to me. But then these were individuals that knew each other and generally had a decent bit of rapport. So now you imagine two folks that had never met each other that hold very stringent positions. So,
yeah, sorry, I was just quickly talking to Obvious Enigma again, and he was saying, I'm still trying to figure out what your retrospective positions on gun control are. And I am pro-gun. I am pretty much as pro-gun as a non-American can be.
Yeah, see, for me, it's like I do support the First and the Second Amendment. I do believe that they help to make us free. While that is a cool meme and everything, I also got to brush off vanity and live in reality. And the meta in which we currently have, we do have a lot of regulations and stuff. And my big thing is, I hear a lot of folks saying we need to get rid of this or that and everything. It's like, okay, no, we can have that discussion. However, that discussion sounds to me like we're going to either revise or amend the Second Amendment. We can have that discussion. I just don't hear folks pitching it in that way. Because as long as we go by the Constitution, it's like you might not like what folks do. And this is why I tend to agree with MC about a convention of states. So a lot of other folks don't like hearing that, but you get somebody that's more leftish and a more rightish individual, and they're agreeing on certain topics. It's like, oh, that's when it scares me.
Well, to be fair, I find it very interesting that when you actually talk to people on the opposite sides of political spectrums, as we now like to define, you find that on a lot of things, we are very similar. Not the same. Nobody's ever going to be the same. But on certain issues, you can agree on in an instance, and certain issues, loggerheads forever. You're never going to agree on them. I suppose the problem is that trying to find out how you actually get the agreement and realizing that you're both coming from a place of what you think is the best, rather than people going, well, they think this because they're this. It's like, no, they think this because they think it, not because they are this. And I suppose I had that problem today, going back to the stream. I had that problem today. As soon as I started talking and certain things were brought up, it was like a red flag to a ball, I suppose, where it's just like, grr.
Well, it's also the issue of topic that usually when it does get brought up, that's where we've observed other individuals that might kind of hold similar beliefs to us, kind of like that's the red flag, like you said, and all of a sudden it's like, no, I need to counter them on this point. And that's why, like, even when Dr. Sheev was kind of saying that climate change, he's like, oh, it's a big fraud. But when I let him finish his point, when I did let him finish, he did say, he's like, climate change is a multifaceted, difficult issue. He's like, you don't just simply boil it down to one factor, which is true. That is an accurate statement there. So I was able to let him finish his thought rather than jump in with the other models and the fact that areas of the Earth are greening. And then at that point, you let him say his piece. He builds up other reports. So you know what? If I see the dude later, maybe he's willing to have another discussion. And maybe we could actually have a debate on climate change or something. So
you might not even need a debate, because if you can agree that places are greening and places are going away, you can then go on to, well, why do you think that that's changing? Why do you think this is going on? And then you can talk about different things. But on climate change, I think, not to go into climate change, because I do believe in climate change, regardless of what people may think and feel on that aspect. But I always I always say two things. With climate change, it's definitely over-politicized. I cannot agree with anybody on the right more. It is over-politicized. It is overhyped. We should have died around about 20 years ago, apparently. But at the same point, it's definitely changing. It's definitely getting warmer. Probably need to do something about the plastic that's now been found in Antarctica and the rest of the world. Let's just agree that we can clean up our own messes and plant some trees.
No. And this is the thing that gets me. It's like, all right, we're so focused on CO2. And don't get me wrong. It's like, I equate it to like smoking cigarettes and stuff. It's like, all right, I bust out a butt. I can smoke this cigarette. It's not good for me. I'm putting poison into my body. But if I just smoke this single cigarette, it's like, we now have knowledge that the human body can heal over time. However, if after that cigarette, I smoke another cigarette and I continue doing this multiple packs a day for multiple years, then it's going to take the body and get to the point where, oh, I'm probably completely screwed. And Mother Earth, we've been blessed enough with our atmosphere, our electromagnetic fields, our tides and stuff like that, that the Earth does itself absorb a fair bit of CO2 as well. If we completely on excess, well, apparently no. Styx actually got me into this. I guess the tides actually there is some
the water does actually pull it in and actually able to some form of plankton that pulls in the carbon dioxide and whatnot.
It might be a churning effect too, because like if the tides are going up and down, that's adding different pressure to areas and stuff. And I am not a geologist or a meteorologist or anything, but I'm just thinking from basic plumbing and just if I'm plumbing a stuck sink, sometimes the water comes up from another area. So
I completely agree. I would say one thing that really, I mean, I've like yourself, I do some research in certain aspects, and I've noticed that there's been one paper, just one, that come out and said that if we wanted to stop climate change, that we would have to plant, I think, 1 billion trees in the whole of the world to stop climate change as a whole. Now, people think, wow, that's a massive number. It's like, you're forgetting how big the planet is. We're not just saying, oh, America needs to plant it. It's the world that needs to plant it.
That's 1/7 a tree for every person in the world. That sounds doable.
Yeah, I completely agree. After all, how much deforestation are we happening? It's happening at the minute. But my point to that is always the same, is that people always say, oh, well, it's about the CO2 emissions. It's about carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide that's stopping the reflecting the sunlight or pulling the sunlight in or whatever. Okay, so why don't we put in our biggest and most natural plant or mass that we have that actually takes in carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide and changes it back into oxygen? Why do we have to get rid of all the other carbon dioxide when we can just plant more trees?
Well, there even might be, and I think you just touched upon this a bit. I think it might be either some form of like a plankton or maybe an algae or something that likely already exists on Mother Earth that we could maybe find, and as long as it's not going to like destroy the indigenous species and stuff like that, if that's something we could promulgate, I mean, we could probably solve a lot of problems. But I do like what an obvious enigma, his last comment there in the chat, he's like, we are affecting the planet as we are its default stewards. Let's take proactive responsibility. It's really that simple. It's like, and that's why I said to Dr. Shiva, it's like, I grew up on the Captain Planet days. It's like, give a hoot, don't pollute. Can we all agree that like poisoning Mother Earth is not a good thing?
Well, no, I do think that that's really interesting from people that, I'll say on the right, but there are people on the left that are similar to it as well. But generally, it is people on the right. I can't be more specific than that. But it generally is. And you start talking to them about climate change, you're like, oh, it's just a big conspiracy. It doesn't really matter anyway. Okay, let's say it's a conspiracy. Let's just say it is. Can we not clean up the plastics? Can we stop killing other animals? Can we just agree on that?
And I think the problem, and I think what has likely triggered some folks on the left, is when you have folks that are on the ideological other side, like a Mark Dice, that are now selling like global warming, bring it on, and pictures of the beach and stuff there. So now you have folks basically mocking them for issues that are highly important, that they care a lot about, where it's just like, okay, I understand why you're doing that. You're doing that for capitalism's sake, and people are buying that to just kind of, what did Bill Maher say? Trigger the libs, own the libs.
I don't think it's just that though, Mims. I think
it goes both ways, though. I think
it does. It does, but I mean, I'm going to pull out my inner MC on this one because I'm sure that you'll be happy with that. But I'm going to pull out my MC on this one and go, well, the reasons why they do that is because the fucking left has been telling us for fucking years that the world was going to end in 1978, 1888, and then 2012, and now it's supposed to end in 12 years now. We're just taking a piss out of them because they get it wrong all the time.
Here's the thing, and this was confirmed to me by ex-Mrs. Memes. It was that I made the statement, and she tends to be a very progressive, lovely young woman, is that many on the left are terrible salespeople. They might be able to create all these fancy technologies and this and that, but overall, compared to many more conservative folks, they're terrible salespeople. And what I think ends up happening in the climate debate, you have a lot of scientists, and they're looking at these models, and they're like, okay, this is what could be this, and then they're glued. They're looking at that worst case model, and their minds are going to the worst possible places. Like, we need to do something about that. And the problem is when they start to pitch something and focus, because, and again, I ain't a climate dude, but if you look at it and you're just giving most of your focus to that absolute worst case scenario, and you seem to be ignoring the others, folks that might not agree with you, or even some folks that do, feel like you're kind of putting your thumb on the proverbial scale. And as soon as you do that to any extent, especially if you're stressed, because it is important to them, I truly believe it's really important to them, and it is the planet. So it's just, when they do that, then folks more on the right and the conservatives, they're going to say you're being disingenuous, and that leads us to kind of where we're at.
No, I mean, I do agree with you. I do think that, I mean, let's take, for instance, the idea of the person I was speaking to earlier. I think that his ideas were very interesting. I think that if humanity, as he suggested, was to change socially, then his ideas would probably implement pretty damn well, apart from, in my opinion, economics. But that comes from a point of focusing on one issue and not focusing on all of the issues. And I don't mean this to be horrible to the guy. I mean, I led him down the garden path on the way of talking, and he probably wasn't prepared for the half of the things that I brought up. So I do hold my hands up and say I led him to certain places. But that was to prove the point that he hadn't thought out the whole of his ideas. And as you said, that comes with selling your idea. If you just go, well, we need to do this because of this, it's like, okay, but what happens when this happens? I don't know. Well, your idea's shit. It's like, it's not. It's just you haven't thought about all of it.
I've been listening to a lot of conversations for a while now, and I try to go back and forth. No, not necessarily specifically your conversation, CSG, but just on the greater YouTubes about a lot of political things, about a lot of like extremely difficult, important issues. And a lot of folks, if you just kind of just get your cursory like news from just whatever, like the big mainstream media and stuff like that, you might have some points. Maybe you watch a couple of videos. And even if you are fully immersed in it, doesn't necessarily make you an expert. I don't know. Are we expert political YouTube commentators now? CSG? We've been doing it for a while. I don't know. No, seriously. If we now have 2 years experience compared to other folks that haven't been doing as long, we might be considered professional. That's the crazy freaking
Professional is different to expert. You said expert. That's why I said no.
Very true. Very true. I'm used to being on that side, though. But the Brady Bunch. I love that. But one of the things is, you see folks, and a lot of folks really haven't, if they haven't been exposed to something, if they haven't heard the argument of another side, maybe they're not used to what it is. So very often we end up devolving into the ad hom attacks and everything like that, because it's like, oh, well, okay, well, F you or something like that. But I think a lot of this, it kind of reminds me of folks trying to be professional wrestlers that haven't been through like the full training and going through the actual
Wait, are
education.
you calling me
at school.
Tonka?
Are
you calling me Tonka?
I don't know. Are you the Native American?
No, but you're saying that I'm practicing.
I used to try to do a better war dance, and by war dance, I just jumped with 2 feet because I'm like 2 feet doing it are obviously better than one. So because child logic, duh.
Exactly.
But no, but the thing is, what I kind of see is, and I did actually go to one of those things to go through the school. They asked me for the $1,500, just like Kevin Nash told me, and I didn't have the money on me, and then I never end up going back to Gorilla Monsoon's old pro wrestling school. But no, the thing that I found there is use a lot of drilling. There's a lot of training because otherwise you could horrifically hurt yourself. Like if you try to engage in a match, like if all of a sudden you're trying to go against like John Cena, Bill Goldberg, or Brock Lesnar or something, and it's like, well, dude, here's the thing, dude. Even if you're in great, phenomenal shape, if you don't really know what you're doing, there's a good chance you're going to hurt the other person or hurt yourself as well, because you haven't been trained. You haven't gone through all the, I'm getting tossed this way, so maybe I need to make sure I land and roll this way or something. So a lot of folks end up getting either really butthurt, or folks end up going after them, trying to dox them because they made them look silly or something. I almost feel like we need to like go through drilling with people or something. Or you don't even need to use professional wrestling. You can use freaking just amateur wrestling, stuff that I did for like a number of years and stuff. The biggest thing you do the whole time is drill, and then you live wrestle as well. Why do you drill? You drill so you prepare yourself, so when you're actually live wrestling, you're less likely to get hurt. So I think we almost need like a bit more drilling rather than folks just saying, oh, let's just get into these arguments. Yeah, you can do that. Blood sports does have its place and everything. It's kind of like looking at a bunch of folks in the street just start going at each other. That's why I'm more of a fan of, all right, if we want to have actual structured discussions and debates, let's be open about it. Let's turn it into like a mixed mental arts or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I always think that, for instance, as you said, we're nowhere near experts, and I wouldn't classify us as professionals either. For a start, I don't get paid enough.
But, like most professions would tell you that.
Yeah, true. But we can sit here, we can have a chat, we can disagree. I think mostly, though I don't think today was probably my best example of this, but I think mostly I can have discourse with most people and be able to have pleasantries with them, so to speak. Not always. Sometimes I get called a paedophile racist, but sometimes it doesn't, and those are the good days.
Almond Joy's got nuts, Mounds don't.
True. But the greater point on that one is that if me and you can talk like this, because we've had discourse before and we've come back and we've talked, I can talk to Lonely Wolf about loads of different stuff. But it, as again, obviously Enigma actually put in the chat, which is amazing, which I'm going to actually put up. Good faith discussion and debate are becoming more rare, i.e. Tonka and Bloodsports type drama ship shows able to eclipse hearty but classy Discord. Because more people, as memes will probably tell you, are more interested in the shit show and the screaming and the shouting that actually challenge their own ideas.
I would take a disagreement with that in respect to, in the short term, I'm taking it from like a sales approach, because in the short term, you can be like a sleazy, shady salesperson and just basically make a bunch of sales, make a bunch of short-term goals. However, if you're doing a bunch of sleazy stuff like that, that's going to end up getting around that, oh, you don't want to do business with this person. So all of a sudden your ability to continue to do business is going to dry up. That's why, unfortunately, some of those individuals, they end up being very transient and kind of traveling around a lot if you're going to follow that path. Whereas the blood sports, I'd say, yeah, if you're going to go around and just be saying hateful things about a whole bunch of folks, yeah, but there's going to be a core of folks that just kind of want to watch the whole Jerry Springer thing. I knew there's a market for that after Jersey Shore got renewed for more than one season. But the big thing that I take away is that did kind of fizzle out because it just kind of blew itself up. Whereas if you take a look at somebody like a Professor Peterson or like a Sam Harris or a number of these other individuals out there that are kind of like, whether you want to call it the intellectual dark web or more of these academic individuals having more of long form discussions, there is a market for that. I'll be straight up. I saw the few $100 or whatever to do the little Professor Peterson thing and get to meet him for 15 seconds. Tell me he was a pretty cool wizard.
But that's the thing, though. I mean, there's certain people that are interested in having discourse and having the ideas challenged and talking and trying to find out the medium between the two and working out the best for how we can move forward. Now, we're not going to go anywhere. We're not going to do anything, but we're interested in that discussion and trying to work out, should we say, in a mediation between the two sets of ideas. We're interested in that aspect, or at least I am, and I'm sure you are as well, otherwise you wouldn't come on and talk.
Who would say this isn't going anywhere?
It depends. It depends on how you would classify going anywhere. If you're saying changing over a very, very short amount of time as evolution, then maybe it is making a small difference somewhere to someone that would make a difference to other people and have a ripple effect. Maybe. But if you're talking about an actual policy change or implementation change that's going to happen directly from this conversation, possibly not. But let's be honest on that one.
No. Metaphysically, I agree with your assessment. To just have all of a sudden legislation appear in the House and Senate and be like, oh, let's do this right now. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, it's possible. It's just highly not probable. However, what you said about everyone affects everybody, I absolutely believe that to be true.
I agree with that. That's the reason why I like to try and have these discussions. Why I like to try and talk about different people's ideas, and I like the idea of working out people's. I'm probably going to butcher this as a technical term, but their phenomenology, which is about world building in counseling and psychology.
I don't think I can say that word.
Phenomenology.
Phenomenology. Oh! It's like phenomenon, but
yes.
Phenomenon. Yeah, no. They did the Peterson remake of that, where he's like phenomenon. Do.
But I'm so interested in that, where to the point of I'm going to finish my training for doing counselling. Sorry, another 2 and a bit years. Then after I've done that, I'm still going to do my counselling, but I'm going to go straight into studying at university to do psychology, because I'm so interested in the idea of world building and how people from religious backgrounds, people from poor backgrounds, people from rich backgrounds, or any background whatsoever, have their own forms of building their world and their interaction and reality with it. And how certain people's reality is similar, but no one's reality is exactly the same. So is our interpretation of reality our true reality, or is it how we just understand it? Or is it all just a computer game that we need to level up on?
Well, I love the play on words of the shirts that I normally have, and things that I do tend to agree that all humanity should do, and I'm terrified every once in a while when we have these discussions like, oh God, this really does seem like a game. But then again, is it just not in our nature for us to put our nature into some form of text? So are we simply transcribing how we view things into a form that is actually understandable by other folks, given basically, I have no idea where I was going. All I know is I like what Enigma was kind of writing there, because he does bring up a very interesting point. So a couple other dichotomies and kind of groups we're having here. He says there's a growing number of people who love both their techie toys and the outdoors. The seeming conflict makes for great drama, internal dialogue, conversation is just plain old fun there, because that is very interesting, because a lot of times you'd have more of some communities like gamers and stuff. And as a gamer that basically just kind of hid away in my room and stuff like that, played a whole lot of World of Warcraft for far too long and everything. And as an individual that does enjoy to go camping on occasion and like did a lot of skiing and stuff back in the day, a lot of times those would be different communities. But when you have that intersect there, and now you actually have discussions and stuff, that's where you're kind of having the branching out of worlds. And this is why I actually kind of look at a lot of things that some folks on the left that bring up, and when I actually go back down to a lot of the sources, like for instance, intersectionality, that was something developed by Professor Crenshaw. She was a professor, I forget the university, my apologies, but basically she happened to be an attorney, she happened to be Black, and she happened to be a woman. So all she was basically saying, just in the origination of it, it's like, well, there are certain issues that Black folks may deal with that may be a bit different than some other folks around, depending on the situation. There's some situations that maybe a woman would have a different interaction given upon a situation. So all she's saying is there's just kind of an intersection and a point to maybe take note of. And I watched as she was interviewed probably about a year or so ago about how some folks have taken her conceptualization, and they've kind of turned it almost from like the shield of social justice and reforged it into just like the halberd of smiting folks that simply disagree with them. And it's very sad because the base concept, a lot of these things, I mean, when I look at it, I'm like, well, they're not wrong about these things, at least in a specific.
No, I mean, even I can agree. Even I can agree when I'm as you know, a staunch opposition to the idea of intersectionality and that. But if you explain it to the point of just saying, well, intersectionality in its core is just saying, well, black people would deal with, let's say, as a generalization, probably more poor and crime and ghetto areas because of living and so on and so forth, as generalizations. Then you can say, well, women, you know, you're never going to be, as a man, deal with a period. Women are. That's intersectional. That's something that you will never be able to deal with. Well, unless, you know, you cut yourself.
Yeah.
Sorry, I just realized I was swearing at people there.
No. How dare you do something like that and me not even notice or really care? But well, the interesting thing there is, and there's actually two things from Professor Peterson that I will cite. And again, even if I don't agree with the man on everything, I need to try to take wisdom and knowledge from where I can get it. Is that basically if you go to certain degree, like basically if you pick 6 particular intersects there, if they're a particular intersect, you go back down to the individual. So that's the big thing. And like I remember I was watching, I think it was like the Sargon and one of those guys debates where he's like, no, it does explain this. But the thing is, they just end up getting caught up on like little like ad hom attacks or like you're a Nazi or you're a commie or just that kind of just mantra seemed to be going on. That's why I took away, even if those exact words weren't used. The thing that I see there is, okay, you were talking past each other. You had a chance to kind of just make a connection, but then whether it's the fact we're in front of a bunch of folks and you're just trying to show your side that you're the man, the person, whoever it is, I need to have the biggest balls on the table. That's almost what it seems like there. But the thing is, if you boil it down, you do get down to the individual, and that's reference points. And that's something that could be used as a benefit. Yeah, have some folks use that as ways to kind of beat some folks down. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that's right. But the thing is, if you go full circle, it's going to come around and just, dude, wait for it. This is why I think we're starting to see things like the straight pride parade and stuff coming out. It's like, while I may believe that's a troll, I was talking with the dude, one of the organizers, Samson, the other day. And what he said is, when I asked him, like, well, what would you say to folks that would say that, oh, this is like an ideological battle that you're drawing here, or you're just kind of doing this for trolling? He's like, yeah, no, it is ideological. And he did bring up some points that, I mean, I have brought up before, because I'm like, okay, well, if the only group that we have, at least in the States, that you're allowed to kind of just pick on, just make fun of, just with no worry at all, it happens to be straight, white men. And you know what? That's fine. That's fine. Make jokes and everything. The problem you have is, if you're allowed to make fun of them, okay. But then if they go to make fun of folks that are not part of that group, and then you restrict them and you call them racist, sexist, homophobic, so you don't allow them to get any level of catharsis at all. So you're adding pressure and you're not allowing them to relieve pressure. And if you got a whole bunch of often very generally young men and stuff like that, and they're getting pissed off and they're not having good opportunities, what do you think's going to happen? And I mean, it's just like, I'm just looking at just what I've seen around the world, just even in my lifetime, man. So
no, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think things like MGTOW, things like that. Now, I don't support MGTOW by any stretch of the imagination, but when you compare MGTOW to the extreme of feminism, it's basically polar opposite. It's basically polar opposites. Women go in their own way in the extreme of feminism, and men go in their own way. It's basically the polar opposites. They are ideological opposition. I mean, we've seen this, we're going to do this. It's reaction upon reaction. And I just want us to stop fucking reacting. Just take a step back, listen to what they're saying, realize that it's an ideological point, as you quite rightly said, and it's something that's affecting them. Don't say they're only doing this because they want more of this or they want more of that. Listen to them, engage, find out what they want, and then work out how we can all co-op together. Yes, I know. I just realized I use co-op. Fuck you guys.
Well, and the funny thing is, it's that's generally what's going to be the genesis anyway. Because you can start with whatever you want, you can have good ideas, but it's just eventually at some point there will always be a certain level of corruption, folks acting in their own self-interest and stuff like that. I mean, that's going to happen. That's just part of human nature. The big thing that I end up really seeing is you're always going to end up having many of these things devolve by purity spirals. And I guess Bill Maher, some folks apparently, according to Tim Pool, are trying to boycott Bill Maher because he was calling out folks for saying, no, you're just going down purity spirals and everything.
Yes.
Like now you're ejecting folks because they're not woke enough or something. And it's just like, this is why I've been saying for about the past year and a half or so, I'm like, a lot of this stuff, it's like, why am I not necessarily attacking the left on these things? I'm like, if you come full circle, if you play the game fully out, what are you going to end up having? You're going to end up having folks saying, well, you have, and this is what I would say to some of my more liberalish folks, is like friends and brethren. It's like, well, maybe we should consider our liberal privilege. Well, what do you mean memes? What do you mean liberal privilege? I'm like, okay, if most folks tend to think the way we do, that makes us a majority. And if we have a lot of folks in positions that believe like we do, in like positions of power in the media, this and that, I'm like, doesn't that give us a certain form of privilege because we are a greater majority? So we should think about those that maybe don't necessarily believe things, and maybe we should at least hear some of the things. If they're doing violence, no, we should condemn all violence there. But I just see it going this way, dude. I don't think it's going to be that long before we start seeing folks calling each other like Anglophobic and stuff like that, because that's the way I see things going.
I've seen people on Twitter with, yeah,
it's already happening. It's already happening.
It's a possibility. It's a possibility. But you do make an exceptionally good point, and that's why bitching at this minute it's now turned into a bitch fucking stream. I do find it really interesting that people that bitch about identity politics, and they really bitch about it, like, oh, they shouldn't be doing this because they shouldn't be using identity, they shouldn't be doing this and shouldn't be doing that. Normally go, me as a white Christian conservative, it's just like, wait a minute. Just wait a fucking minute here. So you hate everything the liberals are doing, but you're playing the same fucking game and then moaning at them for playing the game and then saying, hey, just playing the game. It's like, so you're trying to beat them by fighting them in the mud. You're all really special.
No, and the Overton window is creepy. Yes, it definitely that's very memeable. I feel like somebody's going to do something like that. But one of the big things you do see, and I think I take it you probably noticed this as well. And again, like, I'm not really consuming as much Sargon content as I did when I quote kind of found a greater skeptic community. Occasionally he'll pop up in my feed, and if it's something I'm interested in, I might listen to like half of it or so.
I can't listen to him anymore. Sorry, carry on, because otherwise I'll just stop you from your thing.
Yeah, but my thing is, I've noticed some of the terminology being used, and even not just Mr. Avocad, but some other folks here on the interwebs within some of these communities, let's say that maybe we and some other folks that may watch this stream have followed at some point. Some of the words they're using, it is very interesting. These seem to be some words and terms that I think it may not have been that long ago that they were kind of, I don't know.
Reading against it.
Yeah. And it's just like, wait a second, wasn't I just saying? I'm like, okay, we're just playing different games. If we start playing at least the same game, then we can at least kind of figure out which way we're going and maybe figure some things out. I'm like, if you have folks on the right just saying, I don't want to play the game, and the left is like, well, here's our game. We've been playing this for a while. Nobody's coming to play it with us. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I happen to believe that. I mean, group characteristics, identity is important, but we are all individuals.
No, I completely not agree that. No, I mean, identity is very important, but to play the idea of identity politics where everything comes into subsections of this, and this, and then if you're not this, or this, you can't talk about that, or this.
It's complicated for human beings to do, because you're talking about an infinite number of factors, and then we just often revert down to just like 3 to 5 of the most blatant ones.
Well, for instance, you've got white privilege. Okay, well, I grew up on what you would call a ghetto. my mum and dad had to work constantly all the time and everything else like that. I didn't have the best of upbringings. Does that mean that I'm privileged because I'm white? Or if somebody that was black had the same upbringing, does that mean that we're both privileged? Why is it that my skin color now is determining if I'm privileged or not? Shouldn't it be about my upbringing? Oh no, it's about how society would interact with you. Society kicked me in the fucking teeth and told me to get up. That's all that happened.
Well, that's the thing, and to not acknowledge another person's lived experience. I mean, it really goes back into the whole like Naruto talk no jutsu mantra. It's like once you hear a person's story, you might not always agree with the decisions they made, but you at least get the gist of where they're coming from.
All I'm going to say to that is pain deserves to die.
Well, that's not what Mr. Uzumaki chose to do.
And that's why he's better than me. Yes, he is. He's better than me. Anyway, without all of the memes of destruction playing out.
Like I said, that is the path that I'm looking down. And that's when MC always asks me, well, memes, what's your solution? What's your solution? I always say something, we need something grand and transcendent. Do I necessarily know what the hell that is right now? No. But all I know is I'm trying to walk down that path and just
do we need something grand though? Do we need something grand, or do we just have to realize that different people have different ideas? And if we respect those ideas rather than playing identity politics, saying that you can't say this because of that, maybe we'll get somewhere again. And that's the reason why the Overton window is creepy, because it's dictated by how society decides what you can and can't talk about.
Well, now apparently we have the ability to talk about certain, almost touching upon neo-Nazi ideas as well as almost seemingly some Stalinistic ideas and stuff. And that's what we need to do is we need better incentives, because like Sam Harris always says, we need.
Question.
Sure.
We're at polar extremes, as you quite rightly just pointed out, where you do have the Stalinists and you do have Nazis. Let's not beat around the bush. There are some there, not as many as people say there are, but there are some. So the ideological opposites are there. If we just come and started talking again, would those extremes not move in?
Well, here's the thing, and actually, this is something I took away from CNN from several years ago. Actually, no. This is before the 2016 election results and everything. I think it was like 2015 or something. But CNN, I think they still have the show. It's Shades of America, and I think the host is Kamal Bell. And dude, one of the very first episodes, the host, Mr. Bell, happens to be a black gentleman, and he met up with KKK members. Dude, they're showing him like 2:30 in the morning, just like flashing lights and stuff. And then he ends up going down to like one of their rallies and stuff. So they got the fire there and they're drinking beers and stuff. And all I remember from watching that show is they're talking for a while. And he's like, do you really having fires and drinking beer and talking NASCAR and sports? And it was like associated with like the traditions of not liking black folks. He's like, do you really? And it's just like, all of a sudden you have individuals, all of a sudden they're exposed to a gentleman that's
any ideas, the more you realize that the ideas and people that you thought were bad, not as bad as what you think they are. After all, humans are scared of the unknown. So if you don't know what the other person thinks and what they want, then you're going to be scared of what their ideas mean. Big bad communism, big bad capitalism. It's just their words. Understand what they mean and you won't be that bothered about it.
Yeah, no, then that's why I tend to believe like our minds tend towards the worst possible place, especially like you said, when we are afraid of the unknown. It's like, I don't know. So all of a sudden it's like, I'm trying to figure this out. This person made this comment on this particular issue. So thereby many other people that make this comment on this particular issue also believe X, Y, and Z. So we try to fill in the gaps, because to just have an open and just like nonstop. Basically, it's kind of like being a computer and holding something in your random access memory. Like you might be able to focus on that one thing, but be able to focus on that, focus on this, and focus on everything else you're doing. You're going to like overwork yourself just because you can only focus on so many things. Plus, you have the stimulation from just living, existing, breathing, looking, hearing, and everything. And that's why these are very complicated things, but we boil them down to very simplistic memes. And so I think that we need some better memes. Well, we need a lot more than that as well. But I think that's a start. A lot of it is the incentive, man. Kind of getting back to what we were talking about, because why do we see a lot of these divisive conversations? Why do we see Sargon of Akkad and Styx and Hammer 666 versus Richard Spencer and like Millennial Woes and stuff like that, and JF is tagging in, leaving moderation and stuff, because it's like a Royal Rumble and stuff. You want to see just folks just start yelling at each other, going at each other, because it's a gladiatorial sport. That's why I'm like, if we can take that general concept of having a debate and get into a form where, rather than just trying to lop the other person's head off, you're trying to land the jabs, work the body a little bit, and then maybe just put them in like a form of an arm bar and get them in the cross-face chokehold or something like that to get them to tap. It's like, if you could do that digitally, dude, I think you just have a whole market there. And then we can actually have folks working on arguments, actually being able to work on discussions, rather than just trying to think of like the best ad hom attack. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, but like that was the job of like comedians. And it's like, now we have a president of the United States who loves to shitpost.
Well,
and with all due respect, our historical president, don't get me wrong, I believe we've had other presidents that have been trolls before. Absolutely. But as far as internet trolls, President Trump is our first.
No, I completely agree. I mean, I would love the fact of somebody like Boris Johnson being a little bit more open about what he does, or any prime minister. I think it's very open for him to be able to do what he does. That doesn't mean that I agree with everything he says. That doesn't mean that I even think everything that he says is completely factually correct. I'm not going to say he was a liar or anything. I'm not going to say that everything he's ever said is factually correct. But at the same time, it lets you know what he thinks, what he feels, and it's him. It's not the media that's spinning it. It's not anybody else. That's what he said and how he said it. And I think that's amazing on the idea of politicians in general. I wish more were like him in his interactions, not him in general.
Any man that can go back in day and utilizes an argument, we were playing whiff-laugh. Just anybody that can do that and say that with a completely straight face, I'm like, oh, I don't feel like I should like this as much as I'm liking this right now.
But that's the thing. I mean, the thing is, we like to... I've noticed this a lot, and I said this in my last video, and I've said this a couple of times now. It seems that people generally want to strawman a position. Now, say, for instance, I've got somebody that I've seen in the chat that likes MGTOW, for instance, was part of it. Does that mean that I think that he's bad and he's a woman hater? No, I would have to talk to him and find out. Just because that he's under that label doesn't mean that he is. It just means that he wants to do his own thing, whatever. But because people have now put in a prejudice towards that, my initial feeling and thinking is that that person may be that. And I have to defeat that prejudice because everybody has forced this straw man onto me, the same as what it would be with conservatives or what it would be for other identities that are now being pushed. And we have to defeat the straw man before you can even fucking talk to him anymore. And I hate that. I hate politics now. You have to defeat the straw man of somebody that's created you or you created of them before you even can have an interaction. And that pisses me the fuck off.
Oh, well, I mean, couldn't you just drop that straw man in a sinkhole?
I can. As I just said, I'd have to talk to him. I've got the prejudice, but I can drop it and go, well, no, I need to talk to that person before I even confirm it.
The
people don't.
The straw man that you're kind of developing because of potential prejudging of an individual.
Yes. Yeah, okay. Well, that's what I mean by the prejudgment of the straw man. The straw man is turning into the prejudgment that you would make as a conservative or as a liberal of the opposite side. You now have to defeat that straw man that they create, their prejudice that they have that's been built up to create that straw man of what your position is before you even tell them what the position is. Go on. I was going to say, I've had conversations with people about countless different things. And before I've given what my actual position is, I remember talking to, not today, but another ANCOM, and was talking about how I don't think that social healthcare should be solely by itself. And he was like, "Oh, you're a fiscal capitalist. You're an anarcho-capitalist." I was like, "No, I'm actually for a mixed economy. So I believe in having mixed social healthcare with private healthcare." And he's like, "No, you don't. You're a capitalist. Otherwise, why would you want to?" It's just like going now. The discussion's gone.
The thing that gets me is like we're trying to just look at it as just this straight dichotomy, and the thing that I've learned over at least these past couple of years is politics ain't binary. It's just
I saw.
Really no, and actually maybe it's due to probably some of my privilege, the sheer fact that
Doo-doo. He said doo-doo.
Oh no! Oh my God! I use the word myself. No. And when I say that, no, I have, because at least when I went to a state university here, one of the things that happened my very first freshman year, dude, one of my very first classes in the morning was actually Politics 101. And a nice older Greek gentleman who actually did some bits on like local radio station just discussing politics. And what he did is he asked us a series of 5 questions. I forget exactly what the full 5 questions were, but he asked them, and he's just like, just write down just generally like where you kind of like feel upon this particular issue. He read it out, and then at the end he's like, so like this number 1, if you happen to generally think this is typically the more liberal side of the issue, and this happens to be more conservative, and he explained which the sides were. And then he happened to ask, it was something along, I forget how exactly we did this, but he asked, how many had all liberal things? Not a single person raises their hand. How many had all conservative things? Not a single person raises their hand. Yeah. And at that point, I'm like, oh, well, people think of different things. So maybe it was the fact when I was a younger memes, that was something that just was ingrained in me. And I'm like, oh, well, that's cool. And I really stopped paying attention to it for a while.
Yeah. But I mean, that example is exactly true. I mean, I said about my mixed economy, and straight away somebody in the chat says that I am a socialist. And my response is, no, I like some social programs. That doesn't make me a socialist. I don't want the means of production to be means of production put into the working class, into the workers. Because that's not what my end goal is. I like the idea of a mixed economy, not the idea of one having true power. And the end isn't the same thing.
I kind of see it as you're more of like a cup of coffee. And by that, I mean, you might have your raw black coffee, just straight off the bean and everything there. And it's like, all right, well, we got to add some sugar to this. We got to sweeten this up. So you're adding the sugar of socialism in there. You're mixing it in, but you also need to bind all that too. So you have a little bit of conservative, like cultural things that folks hold in common. You add a little bit of that cultural cream in there. And now you have a nice, tasty beverage that many people can enjoy.
No, it's a good analogy, to be fair. I mean, I like the idea of a mostly capitalist system, but I do think that there's some things that human nature, as in charity, will not cover for people in themselves. I don't think that it would. I don't think humanity in itself, like communism, would cover that. I don't think people are that generous that they would pay for people to not work, for instance, that are disabled and whatnot. I'm not saying that there wouldn't be people that wouldn't do that, because there would be, but not in the same end as what there is in a taxation. And again, you can go into the idea of taxation as theft and blah, blah, blah. But I do think that with a mixed economy, it provides that aspect of having privatization with the idea of a social net. And with the idea of a social net, nobody gets left behind, in theory.
Well, what I'm kind of seeing a lot of here is whether you do it by private or public means. Just as somebody that has studied business in school, is that the less steps you can have in a process and the less basically middle folks taking care of it, the more efficiency you will have. And actually, that is one of the arguments for like socialized healthcare, in that if you're removing the agencies that very often are for profit and everything there, now you can devote a higher percentage of funds towards care as well. But at the same time, the form of private charity, and MC is somebody that actually kind of turned me on to this as well, is because he used my own words against me. He's like, I'm like, MC, how could we do private charity stuff? He's like, because I believe most folks are good people. And I thought about that. And after hearing my own words being used against me, I thought about for a while, and I'm looking, I'm like, okay, so what are the other factors? Because maybe something has changed from maybe the last time we kind of tried to do this. And with the internet, if you go into GoFundMe, you see so many of these different things of folks helping people. Now, maybe it would be more of almost like a public-private partnership, because it's like you said, you don't want people to fall through the cracks. Like my nana, who happens to be getting like a social security check, I don't want her, like, she doesn't know how to use a computer or anything. I mean, if you had ability to start adopting folks, but you need to at least have, for the folks that aren't familiar with the way things work, you need at least an exchange period if you're going to transition to something like that. Just because in my mind, if we can maximize the amount of resources we can dedicate to helping folks out and designing the system in a way where they can actually like help bring themselves up, kind of like, yeah, well, many folks might have the ability to pull themselves up by their bootstraps and stuff. A lot of times, if you got like a helping hand, at least offering, and you are able to take that, I mean, maybe that's the extra little oomph you need to really get out of a stuck situation. And again, yes, it does depend on the individual, but I think there's something to that. Or whether it's putting the incentive in there to basically be able to help out another human being. The exact solution in its current form, I have no freaking idea. There's far many smarter folks than myself that have been working on this stuff for years.
No, I mean, I completely not agree. I mean, I think the idea, I mean, the gentleman, I believe it's a gentleman, is saying something which I do agree with, actually. The government has never been efficient. I'm guessing he means efficient. But I'm not saying that I want the government to be the sole proprietor of the health service. I want a mixed economy. The reason why I want a mixed economy is because I think that the privatization of part of it will make the government side work better. It will streamline it. It would also force them to be able to compete with the privatization. Otherwise, people will just pay into the private system. And if the private system gets too bad compared to the social system, the private system will have to compete. So it's always going to be a balancing act. And yes, I realize I'm now dancing.
You're doing the line on multiple plates thing there, but what I'm seeing, and I've seen folks that I particularly really haven't seen, or at least noticed, perhaps by fault, in the chat there, and we got some interesting discussions going on here, and I do like these perspectives here. And then the other thing is, there are also at times other individual agencies. Like I remember, I think it was a nonprofit somewhere further south that at one point they donated like $50,000 in coconut M&Ms to like some veteran service center. And don't get me wrong, it was just the fact that, all right, hold on, did you seriously donate? And maybe it was given to them for free, but somehow I thought it was an expenditure, and I'm like, really, you bought $50,000? Why is it in the back of my head, as somebody that worked as a salesman, think that somebody may have had a quota of bags to sell or something? And again, I don't want to be accusatory, man, but it's just, I think what we need right now are quality sets of tools that really just can self-verify and just be more open, transparent, if you will. I think the reason why a lot of places don't want to be open and transparent is because they don't want to be criticized. Why don't they want to be criticized? Because a lot of times making sausage it's not sexy. It's not something people want to see. It's something that makes people very uncomfortable. That's very easy to criticize. So, and I have a stepbrother, and what he tells me is he's kind of more along the lines of like the EU. He's like, you know what? Just put all these folks in a smoky back room, let them figure this out, and come to an accord. Whereas I kind of have more of the argument of, no, bring stuff into the light of day. Will things be difficult? Yes. But a wise man once said, we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard.
Yes, JF.
I don't watch JF that much.
No, sorry, Kennedy.
Oh. Well, I was down on the Cape. Not Hyannis or Martha's Vineyard.
But no, I mean, I do actually completely agree with you on that one. The thing is that governments and shady organizations always think is that the generalized public are not smart enough to realize what's going on and make their own informed decision. We need to make it for them. And as you quite rightly said, bring things into light. Most people will go, well, they did it for this reason. I can understand the reasoning. It's not particularly a good reasoning, so I'm going to stop. Or well, I can understand the reasoning. I'll give them another chance. But if you don't do that and it comes out as a conspiracy, then people are just going to go, fuck off.
Well, the issue we have is when we start devolving into us versus them, call it tribalistic, call it just whatever istic or ism or whatever it is you want. It's just now it's like, okay, whatever happens.
You want to know what I call it?
I'm going to destroy. What is it?
They call it flipper.
I think I'm going to meme that. I love Flipper. Oh, it's such a good show, even though they use the exact same stock footage of the fake shark hitting the gate every time Flipper came in every single time. Oh, but yeah. So this has been an excellent discussion on immigration, CSG. I'm glad I came.
Yeah, well, you know, I could tell that you weren't coming into the discussion to be talking about the topic as it. Oh, we'll do a quick sidestep. Like, yeah, all right, memes. I'll just stick to what you want to talk about. It's fine.
Oh, dude, no, I only just wanted to touch upon that for like 60 seconds. I was happy to go. My apologies for not.
So how do we sort out immigration then? How do we sort out the border in the southern side?
I'm gonna go with what President Trump said, and we need a big, beautiful door, and hold him to that frickin' thing where he's like, all right. If you want, okay, I have no freaking idea right now. My big thing is, okay, if about 30, and this is something that MC brought up to me, if about 30 years ago, President Reagan made that deal with my former senator, Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, and he was known as the Lion of the Senate, just a very first fierce fighter for liberal, maybe some would say progressive values and whatnot. And the thing is, if he made a deal, and if in that deal he did say we were going to do something about getting serious on border security and doing some form of a barrier, if that was something that was promised, we should try to keep our promises. And my big thing is, even if I'm not a big fan of stuff like that, if President Obama did say elections have consequences, if it is something that will deter folks from bringing children along very dangerous journeys through the desert and stuff like that, okay. But at the same time, we need actual immigration reform. Because I'll give you a real quick...
I agree. You need immigration reform.
25-second example, and this is from over a decade ago, man. So, like, I worked with a gentleman doing security. Just good guy named Mike. And Mike happened to be married. And he married a lovely young Honduras woman. And the thing is, even though that they were married, even though she was working there legally and everything, in order for her to try to get citizenship, it was taking like at least a couple of years at that point. I think they've been trying for like 16 to 18 months, cost them thousands of dollars, attorneys meetings, all this and that and the other thing. And all I remember is it was a huge pain in the butt that was very expensive to do it legit. So I'm just saying there, just even at the time, I'm like, oh, no wonder people it's like don't go through this, because if the process is such a pain in the ass, then you're dealing with it so much. And the other thing too is we need to figure it out. And I mean, we've heard both sides, every side say we need to do something. We need to do something. We need to actually try to do something. And then as soon as somebody's going to do something, folks get distracted by something else. Oh, well, we had this money for some form of a border barrier or additional security or equipment or something, but let this money's going to end up being appropriated for this department or this or that. And unfortunately, it seems like something that stuff from, yes, both sides, all sides, if you would, seem to always have better places to put said funds.
No, I mean, sorry, I had to stretch my back because I've been...
Oh no, we can wrap up. I didn't even know you were wrapping up. I thought you were still in the discussion, and then I just happened to pop in and I'm like, hey, I'm back.
No, but I mean, I've been talking to a lot of people that say that they don't want a wall, and I go, okay, well, what about a fence? And then as soon as they say fence, they're like, yeah, I'll have a fence. And it's just like, is it just the barrier that you're
Yes,
thinking of,
yes.
even though it's still a fence?
No, because a wall can be imposing and stuff. And let's face it, with modern Game of Thrones references, when people hear wall, if all of a sudden they're imagining a 1,000-foot ice brick wall, I realize that doesn't make any sense on the southern border of the United States. But if just somewhat of an imposing mimetic is in their head, that's what they hear. And they hear a fence and they think, oh, a little dinky fence, even though if it's made of gauge steel and stuff that, yeah, you could get through. And here's the thing. They always say, it's like, well, if you have a 20 or 30-foot fence, somebody's going to have a 31-foot ladder. Is that true? Yeah, somebody will have that. But the thing is,
people will see it.
No, statistically, okay, yeah. And it's like Professor Peterson always says, like, you can't model the extraordinary. It's like there will always be outside influences and other statistics. Sure, that's fine. But it's just like if all of a sudden you have something there, and to my liberal friends, it's like, okay, how are you going to pitch this? If you want to pitch this, call it a strategic steel reserve. Basically, if anything ever hit the fan, guess what? We got millions of tons of steel that we just yank right off all the ground and start reforging and stuff.
I agree. I just find it really interesting that I've talked to a couple of people that are staunchly against the wall, but are always for immigration reform and so on and so forth. And then they go, well, what about a fence? Yeah, I'd have a fence. It's just optics.
True. No. Well, yes. Well, a lot of it is semantics, and optics as well. Try this, because this is my best conceptualization if I was going to try to pitch something like this. Refer to it as a recyclable border barrier. Because it's true, because the way they are currently doing it, the way it's setting up, yeah, you can recycle that.
Yeah. But I'm all for the point of trying to say, well, it's the idea of a wall. And then you go, well, let's have a fence. It's like, so you're not against the barrier, you're against the means of how you make the barrier? Seems weird.
To be fair, I think a lot of it is just in opposition to President Trump, because when President Trump comes down that escalator and he used the words that he did, it's just that put a very powerful mimetic to many people, many folks absolutely that, as well as many folks absolutely loved what he was saying. And that, I think, was the seed of just a lot of the divisiveness we have right there. Because the thing is, and I look at what the hell he said, I'm like, okay, this seems like somebody that I don't necessarily think is actually 100% serious. I think this is some notoriety, but I mean, I can't argue with it because the dude man won. But I take the message of what he was saying. If he changed around a dozen words and the placement of some things, and he's like, listen, I believe, yes, most of the folks come over, they are good people, but we must acknowledge realities. There are some whom are bringing drugs, bringing crime. If he had have done it like that, you're communicating.
Do you have a transcript? Do you have a transcript of his original thing where he said that he actually said, believe it or not, that he does think that they are good people, and he specifically said that MS-13 were bad and they are the rapists, and bringing in.
No, that was later. No, that was later after he was president. I'm talking about when he was announcing he was president. Because the sad thing is, we see the sheer fact that we actually get a little confused upon which instance we're talking about. The fact that there are multiple instances, like if we as people that often talk about these things get confused about it, imagine somebody that doesn't often. So we end up confuzzling different situations. Dude, I've done the same thing. Dude, I accused fucking, what was it? Owen McDonald, one of the gentlemen that you had helped introduce me to. At one point, like, I thought he called like you guys Nazis or something like that when he was referring to.
Banned. I am a Nazi according to him. I am a Nazi according to him.
Well, no, but like I basically said something like that. He's like, oh, well, I didn't refer to that. And when I went back and I listened to the stream, I'm like, oh, he didn't say that. I'm like, wow, I was accusatory. I was trying to hit that straw man in my head and stuff like that too. So that's why I liked how you used that description earlier. But yeah, no, we can wrap up. I know you've been going for a while.
Yeah, I've only been going for 3 hours.
That's all. It's a short CSG stream.
Well, to be fair, if I started this at 8 o'clock, my missus would have killed me.
Oh, well.
So, yay. But yeah, I think we're going to end that there. I do think that we can. I do think that if we talk more to people, I do think that we can work out what people actually mean, rather than actually trying to, as I said, and as Memes actually said himself, building up the prejudice and the straw man that we think people are before we interact with the people themselves and their ideas. Because especially if we're going to use Sargon as our god and emperor and people like that, that actually push for the idea of trying to say that we're all individuals and we should all be individualists. Yes, I know I am taking a piss, but I am also using this as an example for the Sargonites. That if he says that, then why would we all presume that all communists think exactly the same? Why would we all presume that all feminists think exactly the same? And if we want them to not think that we think all the same, or vice versa, then we need to drop that pretense and drop that prejudice that we have towards them. Because otherwise, as Meme said, it is just a circle. We distrust them, they distrust us. The circle of life just continues onwards. But with that being said, I bid you farewell. I bid you adieu. And I'll speak to you all again real soon. Bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.
Oh, that's fun.